All right, so we're going live. Hello, this is Warren Redlich. Welcome to our live stream Battle of the Bulls. It's not really going to be a battle, but we're going to try to make it like a battle. To my left is Bruce Burnworth, and below is Jordan Solomon. Bruce is arguably a bigger Tesla bull than me. We'll see how that goes. Jordan runs the Market Rebel channel on YouTube. Check the links in the description below for a link to Jordan's channel. Of course, I'm wearing my t-shirt, the Machine That Builds the Machine t-shirt. Check the link for the description below for the t-shirts. And I'd like to thank the Vasa law firm in Sweden and all my Patreon supporters for helping this channel grow. Before we get started, I asked my Patreon supporters if they had questions. I'm going to take one Patreon question at the beginning, and I'm going to put it to you, Bruce. In 5 years' time, how many electric vehicle manufacturers will run Tesla FSD software?
Yeah, so I think there will be lots of talk about that, and I think Elon will talk about it and make it an offer, but I don't think actually any other car company will be actually running the software, just because the main reason is that Elon has spent the last, since the company started, trying to make the vehicle as safe as he can, and it's the entire system that makes it safe. It's not just the software that's in the full self-driving. And so in order to have a safe vehicle that you're comfortable with operating that way, I think it needs to be the whole vehicle, not just software that's added into another vehicle.
Cool. And thank you, Jessica. I wanted the reason I think Bruce suggested this idea. Bruce was featured in a Wall Street Journal article as a Tesla bull. Is that right, Bruce? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a little bit, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Let me put it this way. They wanted to interview me, and I said, okay. And they took pictures of me and they published them in the Wall Street Journal. But I told them that the main thing I wanted to get across was that I was doing all of this to invest in Tesla and to make a lot of money, not for myself, but to be able to make the world a better place. And I told them a lot about the different things that I was planning on doing and thinking about doing, and they didn't put any of that into the article. The only thing they talked about was basically they talked about this guy that risked a whole lot of money in Tesla, and that was pretty dumb. and that's how it was characterized. And okay, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's funny because what you described, and maybe before we get into the Tesla bull thing, I've been saying for a while, those of us who've been successful in investing in Tesla and have made some money, we have in my opinion, we have a moral obligation that we need to pay it back, in the sense, I call it be like Elon. What can we do to create businesses or find another way to make the world a better place? Elon didn't just take his money from PayPal and sit on the back of a yacht sipping drinks. He said, I'm going to put that money back into building. I'm not saying we got to put all our money back in like he did, but I have some ideas about startups. I have some ideas about venture capital. I like your idea. Could you tell people a little bit about the biome thing? We were talking about this before we came live. Just tell people what that's about.
Yeah, just briefly, and then we can talk more about it later on. But yeah, so I started off, well, I kind of have to tell my story in order to get to that. But basically, I started off in 2017, and I read an article by Tony Seba, and the article explained about full self-driving EVs and how they were going to replace ICE vehicles, and you didn't have to have parking lots, and just on and on and on. It was like, I don't know, 16-page article or something. I read that article, thought about it, reread the article, and I realized that by 2027, it would be really hard to buy an ICE vehicle, and that all the vehicles would be EVs. And everybody at that point in time in 2017 thought I was crazy, because that was not a very popular thing at that point in time. Over the next couple of years after that, EVs started to pick up, acceptance, and now all the auto companies are basically saying they're going to do EVs. Even what last year, I guess Toyota said they weren't going to, and now they are. So everybody's picking up on it. So that was in 2017. 2018, I bought a Tesla Model 3, and I've been driving that ever since. Lots of fun. And then in 2019, I realized, after they'd gotten over production hill and they were on the road to producing the Model Y, and that the Cybertruck was going to be coming out, and lots of good things were going to be happening. I said, okay, this is really going to be a super good investment. And so then I started investing in Tesla. All at that point in time, it was exclusively in Tesla options, and then that went pretty well. And then in March of 2020, with the crash of the market, I said, this is ridiculous because this crash has nothing to do with Tesla. It doesn't affect what Tesla can do or will do in the future. It's just a drop in the price of the stock, and it's going to go right back up. And I ended up selling my home at below market value just so I could have the cash quickly, and got into Tesla with another I basically doubled my investment in Tesla at that point in time, all options again. And then I got to the point where I said, well, wait a second, I'm earning more money than I need now. I'm earning more money than my family needs. And okay, those needs are all taken care of. Now what else can I do to make the world a better place? I started investing in very small businesses because I thought, well, they're kind of getting left behind doing the COVID type thing. So let me do this very small businesses, help them out. Started helping out some farming type people. And then I discovered David Johnson up at Chico State and the system that he had developed. And I said, this is really good. And it's just like with Tesla. I started started looking at Tesla. And I said, this is good. And I looked at it more, and this is even better than I thought it was. And the same type of thing happened with David Johnson's research and what he's been doing. And so now I've started up a not-for-profit for the world company, and our website is www.healthysoilbiomes.cc, and the CC stands for carbon capture. And so our basic plan is to compete and win the Carbon X Prize that Elon has put out there for $100 million, and then be able to use that to expand the system even further and go worldwide, and basically solve the climate change problem, and also allow farmers to have abundance and dignity and equality throughout the world. And right now, farmers are kind of looked down upon, but really farmers are the ones that can save the world as far as climate change and better healthy food. So that's what I'm doing.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to turn over the moderation to Jordan. But Jordan, before you take over moderating, tell everyone about your YouTube channel and about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel, The Market Rebel, and I first interviewed Bruce. It was probably coming up on close to a year ago, before he kind of blew up. And he was tweeting a lot. And so I found him on Twitter, and I interviewed him a few times. I had a podcast back then, and then I kind of switched over to YouTube and captured his story. And at the time I was a Tesla investor, but I wasn't all in or anything. And after talking to him, he really helped open my eyes to Tesla. And this was relatively early 2020, during the COVID crash. And so I basically shifted my whole portfolio slowly but surely. And now I'm all in on Tesla as well. I have a few leaps, and then I've margin as well. So I know we all have a little bit different strategies. I know Bruce is really heavy on the leaps, and Warren, from your previous interviews, I know you kind of steer clear of the options game, but you're basically all in at 90%. So that's a little bit of background on me. I mainly just interviewed Bruce, and you guys are both a little bit older and a lot wiser than me and have a lot more knowledge. So I don't consider myself an expert or anything, but I enjoy talking to you guys and learning from you.
I'm going to tell my wife someone said I was wise. Cool. So how are we starting this, Jordan? How are we doing this Battle of the Bulls? Oh, and just to be clear, I believe my portfolio, my retirement account is about 85% Tesla. It depends on what the Tesla share price is. It just went up and I never sold a share, and it went up so much it became a huge part of my portfolio.
Nice. There you go. So I was thinking in the topics here, we talk about Twitter and YouTube approach. How you got on Twitter, YouTube, why you started, and then we'd go into the investment approach, which I know I just touched on briefly. Basically how you got involved in Tesla and your methods for investing in Tesla.
So who do you want to start?
Well, I guess Bruce, why don't you start? Because I guess we're technically guests on Warren's channel here, and then Warren, you go ahead and respond.
Yeah. So I've told a lot about my story and how I got to this point. So as far as specifically with Tesla and Twitter, so there I started getting onto Twitter initially. I think I just followed Elon Musk. And I thought, okay, Elon's tweeting a lot, so I better follow him because I've invested heavily in Twitter. So I followed him. And then I thought, well, I guess I should share some of the information that I have, and give back to, because I was listening to a lot of people and what they were saying on Twitter, and it was pretty valuable stuff. So I thought, okay, well, I'll share some of that. So I shared some of my ideas on Twitter, and then started growing more and more followers. And I thought, okay, I guess I'll just keep sharing. Some people seemed to like it, others didn't. That's fine. I didn't really have a purpose of growing, the Twitter feed or anything, just mainly just sharing. And that's the reason also why I did the interviews with Jordan, just to share what I've learned and what I've done. And not that I want other people to follow what I'm doing, but hey, if it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too.
Cool. Yeah, for myself, let's see. I've been doing YouTube and Twitter. Well, so I have a long history with YouTube and maybe a slightly less long history with Twitter. I've been a computer geek for a long time. In 2000 and a long time ago, something like 2002 or 2004 or something like that, I ran for Congress and I had a campaign ad. And in 2010, I ran for governor of New York as a libertarian candidate. And so I did a little bit more on my YouTube channel then. And I also created my current Twitter account, which is the handle is WR4NYGOV. I was the libertarian candidate for governor of New York. It may surprise you to hear I didn't win. It was close. It was close. I only lost by about 49 or 50%. Maybe it was a little more than that. Probably more like 60%. But that's where my Twitter account came from. And then when I started actively tweeting again, I ended up staying with that account. I have other Twitter accounts, Fair DUI, Traffic Court, West Boca News, maybe another one. But I mostly tweet from WR4NYGov, and I use the other ones to retweet. So anyway, in September of 2019.
Warren, before you go too far on that, so just a note here, when Warren and I first exchanged tweets back and forth, or email, I can't remember what it was. I think it was on your YouTube channel, but we started talking about politics. And after some exchanges back and forth, I think we both mutually agreed that we shouldn't talk about politics anymore.
Actually, I have so many conversations like that, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But so September 2019, I had been following. So I've been following Elon Musk since early 2000s because I'm a PayPal. As an attorney, I take money. I receive payments by PayPal, almost zero now. But over the course of my career, I've received over $1 million in PayPal payments. So I'm very appreciative of Elon Musk and the PayPal mafia for creating that method for me to get paid. And, he started SpaceX, he started Tesla. I was vaguely paying attention. I wasn't following it closely. I had a busy life. I started following SpaceX a lot closer in 2015. And when they landed that first Falcon 9 successfully, December 16th. I forget. It's something like the date should be a global holiday. When they landed that first rocket booster, I got really stoked. And I started buying Tesla a couple months later. February, I think my first purchase of Tesla stock was February 2016. And I had always had a diversified portfolio mentality that I didn't want to buy too much of any one stock. For a long time, I just invested in funds. And then I started picking stocks several years before that. And I made this investment in 2013 in Amazon, which went up a lot. And I, at some point, rebalanced or whatever. And but I started to come across the idea that, maybe sometimes you don't need to rebalance it. It can be okay to be not diversified. And then when Tesla came along, I started buying stock and I started buying more and I started buying more. And I couldn't persuade myself to ever sell a share. And I started believing it more. Getting over the Model 3 hump was a big deal. And I started buying more stock. And then 2020 hit, and what was probably 25% of my portfolio or 30% of my portfolio became 85% of my portfolio. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like that. And I just buy stock. I've looked at options. It's too complicated. There's too many weird things that can happen when you play options, even leaps. And I just decided, you know what? I don't trust. I don't know if you want to get into the options question now, but plain and simple, I buy the stock. We'll probably talk about the options question later, so I'll hold off on that for now.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So I guess you're next on the topic. Do you just want to get into the fundamentals of Tesla? And I know, Bruce, you don't really go out past February of 2026. You kind of look towards 2025 as that key year. So maybe we could talk about where we see Tesla in 2025. Warren, I know you typically look out to 2030. So talk about, as far as vehicle production, sales, and then if we want to maybe focus on auto first, and then after we touch on auto, we can maybe expand to energy. But I know robo-taxi and auto seems to be the big driver for the next couple of years.
Sure. Just to be clear, I focus between 2022 and 2030, and I'm pretty sure my next video is going to be a 2026 video.
Oh,
but I've kind of settled on 2026 as being sort of a critical year, which we can talk about. But yeah. Well, I'm interested in hearing Bruce's take on 2025. What's your take on 2025, Bruce?
Yeah, so to get to my estimates for 2020, actually, yes, 2025 is the time period. But what I say with this value of stock, it takes until they report on things in January, and then it takes the earnings report in January, and then it takes usually a month or 2 months longer than that for the market really to understand what happened in January. So I'm basically looking at, okay, what's the price going to be for the Tesla stock in February, March of 2026, even though that's reflecting the data from 2025. Yeah, so what I look at is, and I know, Warren, you look more at the battery production capability and all that. I look more at the same type of things that Tony Seba and Kathy Wood look at. They look at the rights law and what that means for the industry. And then I look at what Tesla is doing relative to the industry. And what I see is that both Tony Seba and Kathy Wood talk about how this is a tech convergence, and you have all these technologies converging in order to create full self-driving EV. You have AI, you have robotics, you have battery technology, you have solar technology that kind of comes in there as an energy source. And all of those things come together, and that's something that most people don't realize this, but that level of tech convergence has never, ever happened. And so people that are looking at things and saying, well, this level of stock growth has never happened, Bruce, you're crazy. It can't happen because it's never happened. Well, that's just not the way it is.
I get that a lot.
This is something that has never happened before. And in order for you to look accurately at it, you have to understand that it's never happened before. The closest thing I think Kathy talks about, the closest thing to it is basically in the auto industry, when in the early 1900s, when they had the car and oil and everything that kind of converged together in order to create the automobile that burns oil as a fuel. And so that's a small tech convergence compared to the tech convergence that we're facing now with this. So I look at rights law and what Tony Seba and Kathy Wood's research has shown that the prices are going to go down significantly. And then I look at, okay, who's going to lower those prices? Well, Tesla's doing that. These other companies are just kind of, okay, we got to do electric vehicles, I guess, so let's do them. But Tesla is really the one that's driving the cost down, and they're driving the numbers up. With rights law, it's for every cumulative doubling, you have a decrease in cost of so much. And so it requires you to produce lots of vehicles, which the other companies are not producing. So they can't lower the cost as much because they're not producing the vehicles. Tesla is producing lots and lots of vehicles and producing more and more as time goes on, so they can lower the cost. It's a pretty simple, way of looking at things, but it also is very effective. So I look at that and I look at what Tesla says. And one thing I realized, and Jordan and I did a video on this, is that when most people look at Tesla or look at any company, they look at what the company says they're going to do. Well, the company is restricted as to what they can say they're going to do by compliance rules and laws that are with the FCC and other people. They can't say these things. And so you can't look at what they say in order to really project ahead what's going to happen. So what Kathy Wood looks at is where can they go, not how they're going to get there, but where can they go based on Wright's law. And so they come up with like 40 million electric vehicles in 2025 are going to be sold in 2025. That's a lot of electric vehicles. And then I started looking at the market, and Kathy Wood says 10 million of those will be Tesla. And I look at the market and I just can't see 30 million electric vehicles produced by other companies. I just can't see that. And so I think that the share by Tesla is going to be a whole lot more. And then people say, well, that's not possible because they can't possibly produce that many batteries and that many cars. And I look at it and say, okay, once they get to the 4680 technology, and that's not just the batteries, but that's also, the structural battery pack and the front and the back and the whole new structure, basically a whole new car, except for maybe mostly how it looks will be the same, but the whole structure will be different in the car with that 4680. Once they get that going on 3 different continents, so they'll have it in Germany, in the United States, and in China. Once they get it done on 3 different continents and they have all the supply chains in place to do that, then it's easy. You just do more. And they've proven that they can build a factory and start producing vehicles in a year. So you just build some more factories and you produce more batteries and more vehicles. And then people say, well, you can't possibly come up with that, with the raw materials that you need for those batteries because the mining industry, blah, blah, blah. Well, the mining industry is a paradigm that has everybody viewing it, well, in order to get mining, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this, and you have to do that. And it takes a long time. Well, Elon and his crew, they don't look at it that way. They look at what needs to be done in order for us to have enough raw materials. And then they go out and solve that problem. And that could be doing their own mining. It could be doing their own, taking the raw materials and producing them into the form that they need. It could be doing all of that. If they need to do all of that, I think they will. To me, it's an engineering problem, and these guys are the best engineers in the world. And I've said this a lot on Twitter in these interviews, is I see Tesla as the best engineers, best people on earth, driven by a love for the earth. And that's pretty much a superpower that they can do anything that needs to be done. So that's where I get to Tesla. I see producing 20 million vehicles in 2025.
Okay, so Brad, one of my Patreon supporters asked me to press Bruce on how he comes up with given numbers. I'm not sure you went into real, I think your answer is, well, the prediction is 40 million vehicles in 2025. Is that right? And
yep.
And Tesla will, and the market won't be able to supply more than 20 million. So Tesla will supply the other 20 million. Is there any other calculation that you have to back up the 20 million? By the way, you're not far off my number, just to be clear. I'm not disagreeing with your number. I have my way of getting to a fairly similar number, but I was just curious if you have a calculation that gets you there.
Yeah, so what I generally do is I look at other people's models and their calculations, and there are lots of them floating around. And I look at what, for example, ARK Invest does. I look at what you've done. I look at what other people on Twitter and YouTube channels have done. And I say, okay, I understand that. I understand that. I don't agree with this part. I don't agree with this part. And so I'm going to make an adjustment here, an adjustment there. And what I just described you was basically the adjustment I did to the ARK Invest model to get to the $20 million. But I arrived at 20 million vehicles. I used a similar approach working with your model and working with other people's models, and I end up with the same answer just by making adjustments to other people's models. And,
cool.
And I also look at what what can really realistically happen, and how many, for example, how many gigafactories do you need to have in order to produce 20 million vehicles, and how do you get to that in that period of time? And to me, it's pretty straightforward. We have the three main ones that we're going to have are in Austin and Berlin and Shanghai. I think each one of those are going to produce by that time 4 million vehicles a year. So that's 12 million vehicles. And then you just need to have a few more gigafactories someplace. They're going to produce the rest of the 8 million vehicles. And to me, it's totally doable.
Okay. So Jordan, I'm turning it back to you.
So what do you have a number for 2025, Warren? A doubling every year, I believe. Let's say they do 1 million in 2021. Would if they were to double every year, it'd probably put it at 16. So I was wondering where'd you be at?
I'm in the ballpark of 18 million for 2026, but I wouldn't say that it couldn't happen in 2025. But I'll tell you how I get there. And for me, it's fairly straightforward. I see the Berlin and Texas gigafactories produced as they're planned now. The Model Y and Model 3s at Berlin and Texas, I expect each one of them to produce 1 million of those a year. So that's 2 million vehicles each. And the mix might be different. There might be more Model Ys than 3s, but collectively they will produce 2 million vehicles a year of Model 3 and Model Y. Cybertruck is harder to predict. And I'm sorry, I expect that to be fully ramped. Those 2 million vehicles a year each to be fully ramped probably by the end of 2023 or sometime in 2024. Fremont and Shanghai will be producing, which to me, Fremont and Shanghai, Fremont is sort of the old generation factory. Fremont is sort of an intermediate generation factory, and Berlin and Texas are sort of the current new generation factory. So Fremont and Shanghai together will probably be about 2 million vehicles. Maybe when you include Cybertruck from Texas together, those three together will be about 2 million vehicles. You get 6 million vehicles from those three factories. What's coming after Berlin and Texas are ramping. Berlin and Texas are going to start in, Brian Smith, thank you for the support. Let me stop myself for a second. Because I like to address questions when people give me a super chat. And this is my neighbor, Brian, actually. So thank you, Brian. He's the Duke of Earl on Twitter. Of the 20 million Teslas produced in 2025, what percentage is exclusively bound for the robo-taxi fleet? I think that question is for you, Bruce.
Yeah, so the way I look at that is almost all of the vehicles that roll out of the gigafactories in 2025 will go directly into full self-driving robo-taxi service. I don't think that most people will not be able to afford the vehicles at that point in time because they have such a great potential to earn revenue. There may be some, but I think most of them will just roll straight out of the factories and into robo-taxi service.
Yep. Okay, thanks. And just really quick for Mark Plott, I'm not saying Fremont will produce more than 1 million vehicles. I'm saying Fremont, Shanghai, and Cybertruck together will be 2 million vehicles. So I think Fremont might be 750,000. So to finish what I was saying, so there's 6 million from those three, from the Model 3 and Model Y in Berlin, Model 3, Model Y in Texas, and then Cybertruck plus Fremont and Shanghai. Together, you get 6 million vehicles. So after Berlin and Texas start ramping, Elon said to Sandy Monroe that they're going to work on the next generation factory. The next generation gigafactory is where they're going to produce the 20. This is my theory. The next generation gigafactory is where Tesla will produce the 2023 compact that they hinted at or flashed us on Battery Day, under a tarp. The 2023 compact is going to be another radical step in engineering design. It's going to be a single piece casting of the whole chassis and maybe the whole body. Structural pack, of course, 48-volt wiring, and probably 2 or 3 or more innovations that we can't think of. Like one of my fantasies is they don't bother putting windows in them. It's cast as one piece, solid, which is easier to make, quicker to make, and then you put LCD panels inside. If you want to see outside, you press a button and the cameras show you what's outside. But I'm not saying that is the innovation. I'm just saying that's an example. Doors in the rear, instead of doors on the side, there's a door in the rear, and that makes the car much more aerodynamic, and it's one big door instead of 4 doors, gives you access to all the seating. I think and I'm not saying this is what will happen. I'm just saying I'm trying to think outside the box what might happen. But ultimately what happens is each factory that produces these vehicles is able to produce in much higher volume. They'll use more efficient use of the space. The cost of building the factory will be smaller, and they will be able to increase the velocity of production, which is something Elon has talked about. It's not, the cars shouldn't be coming out of the factory at slower than walking speed. They should be coming out faster than walking speed. By increasing the velocity of production, you pump out more vehicles, and each one of the 2023 compact factories will produce 4 million vehicles a year. There will be one in Texas. There will be one in Europe, probably in Berlin, but I'm not certain about that. And there will be one in China, probably in Shanghai. And those 3 factories will produce 12 million vehicles a year on top of the 6 million that are coming from the existing or soon to be operating factories. So that gets you to 18 million. I think that fully ramps by the end of 2025. So I don't think it gets you 18 million vehicles in 2025. It could. I think it gets you 18 million in 2026. And then I agree with Bruce. I think the vast majority of vehicles go straight into the robo-taxi network. And I think they go into a Tesla-owned robo-taxi network. I don't think they bother selling them to other people. Model S and Model X probably don't get sent in the robo-taxi fleet. Maybe there's some other way of doing it. As far as I'm concerned, once full self-driving and the robo-taxi network go live, it makes absolutely no sense for Tesla to sell a car to a person who's not going to operate it as a full-time robo-taxi. And I mean 18 hours a day or more.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think the cost structure is going to be such at that point in time that, people won't want to. Because as Tesla will realize, hey, I can use this vehicle and I can make this much money with it. Why would I sell it for this cost when I can have it generate this much money? So
yeah, really simple. If you figure each robo-taxi is going to make $50,000 a year in profit for Tesla, which will come down over time. Once supply rises to meet demand, at some point the price per mile has to come down. But at least in the short run, it's going to generate $50,000 a year in profit. And it's going to generate in the ballpark of $300,000 in profit over the first 10 years for a Tesla-owned robo-taxi, maybe $500,000. Why would you sell that to someone for $50,000? Why would you sell it to him for $100,000? You wouldn't sell it to him for less than $200,000 and maybe $300,000. So and people get, I don't know, Bruce, do people get mad at you for saying this? Because people get really mad at me when I say this.
Actually, some of the people I've talked to, like my brother, I explained this to him and he said, well, I better go out and hurry up and buy one then before they go way up in price.
That's what I tell people. Buy it now. Buy it while you still can.
Yeah.
At some point, they're going to stop selling them.
Yeah. So. And they'll still sell them and people will still buy them, but they're going to cost a whole lot more money and most people will not be able to afford them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you made a really good point, Warren, that I wanted to reinforce is that the costs are going to come down. And they're going to come down for operations. They're going to come down for production. And with Wright's Law, that's one thing. We don't know how the costs are going to come down. We just know from Wright's Law that they are going to come down. And so, people say, well, you don't know how it's going to come down. So how can you project that? I said, well, you use Wright's Law and you project Wright's Law ahead, and then you can figure out how much the costs are going to come down. And somehow they'll figure out how to do that.
I'm sorry, which costs are you referring to?
Just cost whatever. For example, on battery costs and car production costs and those types of costs. It's mainly what we're talking about here.
I would just go with Elon and Drew Baglino essentially projected that the 4680 cells in around 2025 would be around $60 a kilowatt hour, which is roughly half what they were, say, last year. I think they may be already at the cell level. And iron phosphate cells, the LFP cells that they're currently using in some of the Shanghai vehicles, that's got to get down to $40 a kilowatt hour or less. I actually think that iron phosphate, this solves the supply problem, by the way, Bruce. I think that the missed nickel is going to be a lot less important than people think, because by my ballpark in 2030, I'm not at 2025, I haven't figured this out for 2025, but by 2030, 80% of the batteries Tesla's using will be iron phosphate, because iron phosphate is so cost effective. It saves you so much money on cost. And most of the applications like robo-taxis don't need 500 miles of range. Right. A robo-taxi with 200 miles of range is probably enough if it takes a 15 to 30 minute charge break in the middle of the day, it's enough to serve for a whole day. Do over 300 miles if it does that. And I think getting 300 miles a day in a robo-taxi is going to be pretty good. So some vehicles will need longer range if they're like long distance robo-taxis, but the vast majority will be urban commuting. So,
and I also think you've talked about this, but as time goes on and you have full self-driving as more and more mainstream, then the vehicles are going to change. You're not going to see the same type of vehicle as, for example, no steering wheel, doors might change, how you get in and out might change, seating arrangements might change, lots of stuff might change. As you get further and further down the line, and almost all the vehicles are full self-driving, you don't need to have as many safety features even in the car as you do now in order to have them safe, because they're all full self-driving, they're all controlled by, AI. So lots of things are going to change over time.
Cool. All right, Jordan, what's next?
So as far as the robo-taxi goes, I know that a few million off as far as the differences for the 2025 production, but if the price of robo-taxi is substantially higher, that's almost more important to the stock price than maybe exactly how many cars are made. If so, when do you guys think they'll increase the price of FSD? I know it's like in May, I believe Elon said they'll do a wide release of the FSD beta. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? And then when do you think we'll secure regulatory approval? Like, what is your kind of general idea towards that? I know robo-taxi is obviously a huge part of the whole investment thesis.
Yeah, so I can start off with that. So I kind of generalize it because, with full self-driving, it seems to be the one thing that Elon has had a hard time in nailing down exactly when things are going to happen. Usually now on factories, like on Model Y rollout, Model X refresh rollout, all those things happen before they say they're going to happen. But full self-driving is something that's lagged. And so I look at things more generally now just to be a little bit safer. And for example, in 2021, I see that full self-driving will have a wide release out to people. It may still be beta, but it'll be widely released. In 2022 is when I see the first robo-taxi service starting someplace. And then in 2023, I see the revenue from that robo-taxi service hitting the books and being included in the earnings associated with Tesla. So I see multiple stages of that. And then after that, after 2023, then you'll start seeing the vehicles change, and there'll be lots of other changes going from there out to 2025, 26. But those will be the big jumps, I think, will be when it rolls out, people start seeing it and sitting in the cars when it has full self-driving. And then when it's actually in service someplace as a robo-taxi, and then when the revenue starts coming into Tesla.
Once you have a robo-taxi in service, at that point, surely it'll cost a lot more than $10,000 for the FSD package, right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going to happen there, except it has to change. People have this sense that, well, if I sign up for a subscription, then I need to lock in my subscription. Well, Tesla's not going to lock in subscriptions. That'd be ridiculous. Right. Lock in subscription rates. So if you sign up for a subscription, that means your rates are going to go up over time. Right. You're not going to be locked in. If you can buy it now, you should buy it now.
That's what Elon said. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's going to be worth a whole lot more in the future. And it's going to get to the point where people won't want to buy it because it'll be so expensive, unless they're going to put the vehicle into a robo-taxi service. So, yep.
Warren?
Yes. So I think I don't like making short-term predictions. I mean, I believe that FSD will go into wide release this year. I believe that robo-taxi will start operating somewhere, possibly by the end of this year, likely early next year, sometime next year. I think part of your question, Jordan, was a little, I don't agree with to some extent the way you phrased your question. I don't think it's about regulators in all places. I think there are places where governments will resist robo-taxi, and there are places where governments will embrace robo-taxi. And Florida, for example, people who are used to me saying this, Florida has already legalized self-driving cars and robo-taxis and prohibited local governments from taxing or regulating them both. So it's just a matter of Tesla or somebody producing a car that meets the standard, which is not really very well defined in federal regulations. It really just has to be a self-driving car. I think if Tesla says it's a self-driving car, then it's a self-driving car. It's not really a well-defined regulation. It's not clear that there's a regulatory body at any level that would be able to say no. And we already know Smart Summon is already operating, right? I mean, have the regulators stopped Smart Summon? I mean, maybe there's states where it's not allowed or countries where it's not allowed, but Smart Summon is out. Smart Summon is a self-driving car, right? I mean, yeah, you're pressing a button and you're watching it, but it's a self-driving car. So we already have self-driving cars. So I think the transition from what we have today, which is people buying cars and maybe getting FSD and maybe not getting FSD, to the moment when Tesla says, all right, the robo-taxi network is live in enough places, we're going to stop selling cars. I don't know when that transition happens. I think what's likely to happen is we're going to see the beginnings of robo-taxi will start in a small place. It might be Los Angeles, it might be the Bay Area of California, it might be South Florida. They will pick one place, I think, maybe 2 or 3 places, but more likely one place where they will roll it out and they will flood that market, not to the point that they have to lower price, dramatically, but to the point where they have enough vehicles to serve demand at, say, $1.50 a mile. For those who don't know, Uber and Lyft are roughly $2.50 a mile. I actually paid about $5 a mile when I was in New York City in the last 3 trips. It worked out about $5 a mile, but ballpark globally, or at least nationwide in the United States, it's about $2.50 a mile for Uber and Lyft. So if they just undercut Uber and Lyft by 50 cents a mile, then maybe they go down to $1.50 a mile rather than $2 a mile. They need to have enough vehicles in the location where they start so that people who request a ride don't have to wait too long. I would say actually they need to oversaturate that market so that nobody waits longer than 5 minutes for a ride when they summon a vehicle. And then they learn from that experience how to balance supply and demand in that market with pricing, and maybe they have surge pricing. And once they get it working in one market, then they expand to another market. They check and see if it works the same way, and they gradually learn what method works. And then they expand to 3 or 4 markets, 5 markets, 10 markets. And at a certain point, they're covering, I figure Florida, Texas, and California, which are the 3 largest states, are going to be pretty fully operating robo-taxis by sometime in 2023. And those are the places where they'll go first. And China will probably be an early adopter for robo-taxi as well. China seems to be, you just have to get on Elon's on the good side of the Chinese government. So as long as he stays on the good side of the Chinese government, it's going to happen there. Europe will be slow. Michigan will probably resist until the last possible minute because it's the home of Ford and General Motors. New York and Massachusetts will resist because they're stupid. Places where governments are responsive. You can kind of look at Uber and Lyft and places that resisted Uber and Lyft the longest and over-regulated them, made it more difficult for them. Those are the places that will resist robo-taxi because it's just their nature to resist what the people want. We call it democracy, but there's places that are not responsive to the people. So I think that's roughly how it's going to roll out. And so once they have enough demand for all the vehicles they can produce, once they're in enough markets that they have enough demand, and keep in mind, I said $1.50 a mile, they can pump more vehicles out in any of those markets and drop the price to $1 a mile. And at $1 a mile, that's where they're making the $50,000 a year per vehicle. And they can go down to 75. The cost, I should say this, the cost of operating a Model 3 as a robo-taxi on a per mile basis in 2019 was 18 cents a mile. That's including depreciation, including everything, 18 cents a mile. That's according to both Elon Musk and a company called Testloop that was operating Model 3s in California for themselves, doing them in high volume mileage. That's what they were getting. So throw into that the 1 million mile battery, which is probably going to be iron phosphate, by the way, which costs less and lasts longer. Throw into that, go to the compact, which is going to be produced in higher volume at lower cost per vehicle. And I think you're going to see the cost per mile drop to around 7 cents. And that's not including if Tesla produces its own solar electricity through solar that saves itself some more money. but I think we were probably looking at around 7 cents a mile to operate a Tesla 2023 compact. So you can drop the price to 50 cents a mile, and those things are still going to make a lot of money. And once you get the price below around 70 cents a mile, and it's falling, you're going to see a massive shift from vehicle ownership to robo-taxis. My lease is up. I can either lease another car and go through all the hassles of finding a car and paying and getting a new round of car insurance and all the other hassles, or I can just say, you know what? I'm turning the car in. I'm going to start riding robo-taxis. I'm never going to own a car again or lease a car again. My vehicle's done. I need to buy a new car. Am I going to spend $25,000, $50,000 on a new car? Which is going to be, by the way, if you were thinking about buying a gas vehicle, something Bruce said, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but something Bruce said that you won't be able to buy an ICE vehicle. I think you said by 2027, Bruce. I think you're probably pushing it might be 2030, but I'm not going to argue with you. What's really
now I think it's more like 2025.
But I would say what's really striking is if you have an internal combustion engine vehicle now, by sometime in 2027, you will have trouble selling it. It will be hard to sell the value. If you bought a vehicle for $40,000, figuring 5 years from now, I'm going to sell it for 20, you might have to pay someone to take it away. That's how dramatic this shift is going to be. That, maybe there's value in the metals and they'll be able to recycle it. And hopefully they're building ICE vehicles now, so they're more recyclable, but they're basically toxic waste dumps in some sense. I think that's going to be a radical shift. And so if you're thinking about buying a car, let's say it's 2024, you're going to see that in 3 years, this piece of shit you bought, it's going to be, you're going to pay $40,000 for a car. You might have to pay someone to take it away 3 years later. That's how dramatic it's going to be. So people are going to be making this choice a lot faster than we realize. And that's when every vehicle produced goes into the robo-taxi network, and the price of a vehicle. And once it happens, you talked about what would the price of FSD be. I think it's more the point that they won't sell a car without FSD. You literally will not be able to buy a vehicle from Tesla without FSD, because it would be stupid for them to sell it to you when they can put it in the robo-taxi network instead.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think this is one area where I'm probably a whole lot more bullish than you are. And that is, in studying what Tony Seba has said about disruption, disruption happens a lot sooner than market saturation. And he sees that disruption happens more at the 2% adoption level. And then that disruption just accelerates up to, the 20% adoption level. And after that, it's game over for the competition. Right? And so what I see happening with, and this is what Tony Seba sees as well, is that with ICE-powered vehicles, there's going to be a point fairly soon, not in 2025 or 2027, but more like 2023, that people aren't going to want to buy an ICE vehicle. Not because they can buy an EV, because there won't be enough EVs to buy. And so you're going to have this time period where people are going to just hold on to their ICE vehicles because they can't afford the EV. There isn't a good alternative, but they know they don't want to buy an ICE vehicle because it's going to go down in value. And so this is another thing that I've seen other people talk about this. There's going to be a boom for a few years there where the car repair companies and the car parts companies are going to do a booming business because people just aren't going to want to buy a new ICE vehicle and they won't be able to buy an EV. And so they'll just keep those old cars running. And so that's going to be a big boon. The other thing I wanted to say a little bit about was the full self-driving rollout. And I think this is the point that Elon made very clear, but I think a lot of people overlook. He is delaying the full self-driving rollout because he realizes that if you roll out full self-driving and it's not like super, super good, it's going to be good enough so that people will not pay attention when they're driving. But there will still be these corner cases that will cause problems. So he wants to get not just 99.9% as good as a human driver or better or whatever, but he wants to get 99.999, maybe even 9%, sure that this is really a good system and it'll work. And he'll still have a requirement that you have to pay attention, but there will be lots of people that won't. And so he doesn't want to roll it out and have a safety problem associated with rolling it out and then having people not pay attention and getting to these accidents with the corner cases. So he's delaying it. And I just see that as, okay, so when it comes out, the end result of that will be when it does come out, it is going to be a huge, huge surprise for people that all of a sudden there's this vehicle that kind of could do most things to, it can go any place, anytime, and do it perfectly. And the other thing I wanted to say was, I've been over to Indonesia, and other people, have been to India and places in Mexico, and you see the car driving and the scooters and trucks all kind of weaving in and out. There is no other system besides Tesla's full self-driving that will be able to accommodate and deal with that. Because
go ahead, sorry.
You'll need to have the full AI, and it's basically the power of a supercomputer behind being able to decipher what people are going to do, when they're going to do it, and then respond quickly. And there's no other system in the world that's even going to be approaching that ability.
Okay, I want to thank Gary for the super chat. Gary asks, what if Tesla gets to solid state before, even a bit after the others? Is that possible? Let me just ask you this question, Bruce. Do you factor in at all the prospect of solid state batteries, and how does that play into the way you think about things?
I look at that just like we talked about before. Wright's law says that the cost of batteries is going to go down over time. How it goes down, we don't know. That could be the solid state batteries. It could be advancements within lithium batteries. I don't know how that's going to happen. We just know that the cost of batteries is going to go down as you produce more and more of them. But
okay.
I don't know.
I'm just going to take Gary's question, and Gary's probably heard me say this before, but I don't know if solid state will matter. The question isn't whether at a certain point energy density becomes less important for vehicle production. We already see that Tesla is producing useful vehicles with lithium iron phosphate battery cells, which are fairly low in energy density compared to the nickel-based batteries that they're using. So, and with structural battery pack and single piece castings, you're going to see a 300+ mile range Model Y with lithium iron phosphate. And that's going to be plenty of range. And the compact will probably achieve 300, 350 miles of range with iron phosphate. So the challenge for solid state is not getting better energy density. There's some use for that in some applications, but it's not that big of a deal. The big question is, can you get solid state to lower the cost of batteries? We already know that Tesla's on the path to very low cost batteries. So it's a really big question whether anybody will be able to manufacture solid state batteries to scale at a cost that's lower than the iron phosphate cells that CATL is making for Tesla, will be making for Tesla in a couple of years. And if anybody's going to come up with solid state batteries, I would bet on Tesla before anyone else. So I would bet you they're working on it. So sorry, Jordan, please go ahead.
No worries. That was helpful. So what sort of drawbacks do you guys see? I know someone mentioned in the chat, that they expect Tesla to be battery constrained through 2023. I think Bruce doesn't feel like they're battery constrained. So maybe we could talk about that, as well as any other drawbacks you guys see that affects the Ultra Bull thesis.
So I'll just take that really quick. Tesla will not be battery constrained because they're going to produce 100 gigawatt hours of batteries themselves in 2022. And I believe they will be able to purchase 150 or more gigawatt hours of batteries from suppliers in 2022. CATL, if people don't realize this, just search for CATL 1200 gigawatt hours 2026. Maybe it was 2025. CATL is planning to scale up massively its production of iron phosphate batteries. And the volume of iron phosphate batteries they're going to produce is so high that there's no battery constraint. The only battery constraint is whether they can find enough nickel. And I think people underestimate the value of nickel in batteries is so much higher than the value of nickel in steel that the price of steel will just go up because people will be, and the supply of steel will go down, which won't affect Tesla that much because they're doing aluminum. I don't know, is there aluminum? I don't know if they're using nickel in the aluminum alloy, but Tesla will be willing to pay more for nickel than everyone else. So that they will have an adequate supply of nickel.
Yeah.
Bruce, you have any thoughts on whether batteries are going to constrain supply of some production?
I don't think they will at all. because I think Tesla will solve it. I mentioned this earlier. Tesla not only they're basically going to do everything that it takes in order to have the batteries that they need for their cars. And that could include, they have the whole spectrum available to them. They can do mining. They can do the production and processing of the materials to get it in the form that they need for the batteries. They can put it in the batteries. They can change their chemistry in the battery to deal with not having the right chemicals that they need and the right chemistry that they need. They can just change the chemistry. So they have all of those things available to them, and they'll just play them back and forth and modify where they can in order to meet the needs that they have. The other thing that I did want to make a point of is that Tesla even says that they'll do 20 million vehicles by 2030, which I see is happening in half that time. And people say, well, that's not what Tesla says. Well, Tesla doesn't say that they will only achieve 20 million vehicles in 2030. They say they will achieve 20 million vehicles by 2030. They don't put that as a constraint or a limit or a maximum. Is just by that date they're going to do it. I think it's going to happen much sooner. And the reason I think it's going to happen much sooner is because there's going to be so much demand. And Tesla will respond to that huge demand, and they'll build the factories, they'll find the raw materials, and they'll build the cars that they need in order to meet that demand.
So Bruce, while we're on that subject, I want to ask my last Patreon question for you. On what basis do you value Tesla Energy? And how large is Tesla Energy going to be in 2025 and 2030 and the way you value Tesla?
We have very little data available to us on Tesla Energy, and especially if you start projecting it out, you can double, triple it, and it still probably doesn't get as big as it's really going to get. So I take a fairly simple approach. And Elon and Ron Barron and others have said that Tesla Energy will be worth just as much as the car side. So I just use that, estimate what the car side is going to be worth, and then double it. And that's what Tesla will be worth. And it's probably not, it's not a very scientific way of doing it, but what else do we have? You can play around with the numbers, and it's just playing around with the numbers.
No, I think Warren, I was watching your interview with Dave earlier today, and I think the big issue was the margins aren't as good on the energy side. So is that am I interpreting that right? Or
well, so I think the revenue per kilowatt hour is lower it's tricky. So I think the margins in energy and the margins in storage are potentially very, very high. To give you an example, and I ran these numbers before, and it turned out I was wrong, and I was wrong. The correct answer was even more favorable than the numbers I was using. So figure a megapack has 3 megawatt hours of cells, which are going to be lithium iron phosphate soon, if not already. And figure that a megapack costs about $900,000. Okay, so 3 megawatt hours of cells, $900,000. It works out to about $300 a kilowatt hour, which is about half of what you get in a Model 3 in revenue. Okay. Now it turns out, I found this video, or somebody sent me this video from 2019. Tesla was selling a 2.5 megawatt hour megapack for $1.2 million in 2019. So the numbers were a bit better. It was more like a little bit less in revenue per kilowatt hour. But here's the interesting part of that. What are the costs of a megapack? Well, the principal cost is probably the battery cells, and 3 megawatt hours of iron phosphate cells at $40 a kilowatt hour, which is where they're heading, is about $120,000. So, and that's probably the largest cost component of a megapack and figure it's $150,000 or $180,000 now, but you're going to be talking about $120,000 for the cells in 2023, 2024, something like that. That's what that price is going to drop to. Figure the total cost of the megapack is double that, and you get to, you call it $300,000, and you're selling the thing for $1 million. Your margin is 70%. The margin on megapack is higher. So the profit per kilowatt hour on energy is on the grid storage. And you could do the same numbers with Powerwall, and it works out roughly the same, by the way. Powerwall sell for $7,500. The cost of the cells and everything together is probably about $1,500. So you got $5,000, you got 6,000 in profit on $7,500 in revenue. So you're looking at the margin, the gross margin, not the net margin, but the gross margin is insanely high. It's way over 50%. It's like 60, 70, 80% margin on Megapack and Powerwall. And you compare that to cars where the gross margin is like 20, 25%. So the profit per kilowatt hour on Megapack and Powerwall, and then, sorry, when you throw in Powerwall, you got to recognize every Powerwall is sold as part of a solar package today. So if you figure the typical solar installation has 2 Powerwalls, then that 2 Powerwalls that cost $15,000 goes along with a $30,000 solar install. So the revenue per kilowatt hour on Powerwall is much higher, right? Because it's not just the $15,000 from the Powerwall, it's also the $30,000 from the roof. So it's really $45,000 in revenue on 30, let's say 30 kilowatt hours of batteries. So it's actually a much higher dollars per kilowatt hour in revenue. What we don't know is what's the margin on the roof. That's a tricky question. I don't know the answer to. How much profit do they make gross margin on the roofs? But I think that the profit per kilowatt hour, which I think is probably more important than talking about margins, just say gross profit per kilowatt hour or gross profit per gigawatt hour if you want to talk the big numbers for company wide, that energy is actually more profitable once you scale. The reason it's not so profitable yet is because they're only doing it at small volume. They haven't hammered down the manufacturing, the machine that builds the machine, right? The machine that builds the Powerwall, the machine that builds the Megapack, the machine that builds the solar roof. They're still working on those aspects. When they get those aspects down, which is just an engineering problem, I'm sure Bruce would say, then you're going to be able to see amazing production at volume and amazing margins and profit per kilowatt hour. And that's only 2 or 3 years away.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. I was just going to say, add on to that. I all that discussion about batteries, and then there's also with battery costs going down over time, and then there's solar costs going down, but then there's labor associated with those things that you can't really reduce that much because that stuff isn't very, you can't use robotics to do roof installations on the complex roofs that we have. So there's
not yet.
Not yet. There's going to be some limits on that. But I see over time, like out in the 2025, 26 time period, on the auto side, almost all the revenue is going to come from full self-driving. You know, the cars are not even going to be sold, so you're not going to have revenue from the cars. You're going to have revenue from the full self-driving. So almost all the revenue there on that auto side is going to be from full self-driving. Almost all the revenue by 2025, 26. And I don't know exactly how this is going to happen, but for the energy side, almost all the revenue is going to come from AI type programs that they produce in order to better handle how energy is moved around the countryside and managed. And I think that's going to be just a huge thing that people just have no concept because it's not done yet, and they just have no idea what's can be done and what's possible. But with AI, there is so much that's possible that it is just amazing. And it's one of the things, you know, we talked earlier about my healthy soil biomes and what we're doing with that. Almost every part of that we're doing has AI associated with it. And it's simply amazing how much more we can do with AI. Even when you're looking at agriculture, you think, well, there's not much you can do. Well, there's tons of stuff that you can do with AI, even in agriculture. So.
Yeah, I want to tangle with Bruce on this robot thing. For people who know a little bit about roofing, it has to be one of the most dangerous occupations we have. And if Tesla is going to solve the real world AI problem, the vision problem, the operating in difficult environments problem, I would guess that a high priority, honestly, I just thought of this now when you said that, Bruce. I haven't come up with this before. Probably one of the highest priorities for Elon Musk is working with Boston Dynamics to design robots that can install Tesla solar roof, so they don't have to worry about these crappy roofing crews that are slowing down the process of installing roofs. And they don't have to worry about some guy falling off the roof and hitting his head. As a personal injury lawyer, that's one of the things I know. If you fall from 10 feet, you're going to break something. If you fall from 20, you're probably going to die. And a lot of roofs are over 20 feet. So it is a very dangerous occupation. And you can wear a helmet. It'll just break your neck when you fall. You know, the helmet will protect your skull while you break your neck. It is very, very dangerous to operate on these roofs. They're steep, they're awkward. You're carrying heavy objects. We can get robots to replace human roofers, they'll be quicker, they'll be faster, they'll do a better job. And if they fall off the roof, then you just replace them with another robot and you won't worry that they got hurt.
Yeah.
And if you're worried about their consciousness, you can transfer their consciousness into another robot.
Yeah. And I agree that'll happen. That's one of those things that I don't know will quite happen by the 2025 time period. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You know, I know when Elon started off, you know, his factory in Fremont, he was going to have everything robots. I mean, everything was going to be robotic, and he realized soon after they started trying to do that that wasn't going to work. So,
well, that's the whole point, though, is he's trying to re-engineer how they build a roof so that it will work. They're trying to re-engineer how you build a car. So you need fewer robots and you need fewer people to build the car. And then you've got to figure out how do we re-engineer how we build a roof.
It just takes time. That's all.
I think this is actually the argument for Tesla building homes. Is it's one thing to try to retrofit a solar roof on an existing house. It's another thing if you say the hell with it, let's just build the whole house and then we can design the roof in an easy way to build.
Yeah. Now you reminded me of another thing that I look at when I look at being a Tesla bull is I see Tesla in the future, and this I don't have any time frames associated with, but Elon's goal is to go to Mars and to have a colony on Mars. Between Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company, they will produce everything that they need for a colony on Mars. And you know, say, well, other people will do this and this. Well, they might, but if they do, then that's great. They'll buy that. But if they don't, Tesla and Elon's companies will produce whatever is needed for a colony on Mars. And that will transfer to things that are also needed on Earth, because if it works on Mars, it'll definitely work on Earth.
Jordan, what's next?
All right. Yes. So this is kind of going back to Tesla, but we have to mention this. This is the Battle of the Bulls after all. Bruce and I have discussed at length his infamous price target of $20,000 a share by 2025. And Warren, from my understanding, you have a similar price target, although it's a little bit farther out, of 40,000 by 2030. So I was hoping, Warren, you could react to Bruce's price target. I know that's a little bit more short term for you, but get your thoughts on that, and then maybe you guys could just debate from there the price targets.
Sure. I think so first of all, I kind of updated my models. My recent model was a little bit different, and I would say I'm more confident in my 2026. I'm 1 year behind Bruce on this. My 2026 price target, I don't call it price target, by the way. My 2026 model, I have Tesla valued at about $20,000 to $25,000 a share. Now, and I do stand by my 40, maybe 50,000 a share in 2030. That's just, you know, you figure out the number of batteries. I'm still working that out. I feel like I took a first stab at a new model in a recent series of videos. I'm going to redo that for 2026 and then maybe redo it again for 2030. But I'm pretty confident that the 25,000, which is based on the 18 million vehicles, it's based on battery production, it's based on profits. What I'm really sorry I disagree with Bruce is on, I think Megapack becomes really, really important. Not so much for the AI, just the value. If the world, and you've seen this in Tony Seba, and I think you've seen this with Kathy Wood, and Elon has talked about it as well. The price of generating electricity through solar and wind is plummeting. It's still falling fast. And I have an old friend, a buddy of mine from high school, still in touch, not in touch that much anymore, but still in touch. We talked recently. About 15 years ago, we were talking about solar, and I'm sorry, I didn't say this. This friend works for a major company that builds natural gas power plants. And 15 years ago, we were talking, he's like, solar's never going to be cheap enough to compete with gas. Gas is always going to be cheaper. You're never going to get there. And I was talking to him like a month or two ago, and he's like, well, it happened. It's over. We're never, we're probably not going to be building too many more gas plants. He's, getting old enough, because I'm 55. He's a year younger than me. He's probably already earned his retirement, but he's like, yeah, it's done. So, solar and wind won. So what we're going to see is a mass, and their prices are still dropping. So what we're going to see is a massive, massive increase in deployment of solar and wind. And in order to make it work, you're going to need a massive, massive deployment of Megapack or comparable grid storage devices from other suppliers. I suspect that CATL and LG Chem will produce those devices, but Tesla will just do a better job of making those devices that will appeal to a lot of utilities. And the market for it is so big that there's room for those guys to produce them too. That's how big the market is. The market is so huge. So you're going to see this massive scaling of Megapack. And even though I agree with Bruce that revenue and profit from robo-taxi is going to be monstrously huge, that's how much Megapack's going to scale. That in my models, I do see robo-taxi being the big driver. But Megapack is not as far behind as you might think. And you run in this problem, which you don't get to by 2025. The problem is there a point where you've produced too many robo-taxis and there's more than the market can bear? And it's a tough question. I think that the cap on the number of useful robo-taxis is somewhere between 100 million and 200 million globally. I'm not sure. It may go a little higher than that. So I would say there's a fairly soft cap. The cap is starting to get firm up when you get to 200 million robo-taxis. And if Tesla's producing 20 million robo-taxis a year in 2025 and increasing, then you get to the 200 million robo-taxis fairly quickly. And so I think at some point you almost have to slow down production, right? If you're going to hit your if I'm correct that 200 million is the limit. So that's an interesting question. I don't have a great answer for. But
that's one of the reasons why I don't go beyond 2026 is because there are so many different things that are going to be happening between now and 2026. And so that's difficult. But then to go beyond 2026, we just have really very little understanding of what's even possible after that. And just to clarify a couple things. One is, in my estimates, I see energy as being just as valuable as auto. I just can't define exactly how that's going to happen. Is it going to be Megapacks? Is it going to be Megapacks plus solar? Is it going to be Megapack solar and all the auto bidder type programs that they're going to have? I don't know exactly how that's going to happen, but I think it's going to be huge. So I agree with you. I can't define exactly how it's going to be huge. And so one other point I wanted to make. So 20 million vehicles in 2020 and 2025. One of the things that I used in order to arrive at that is all the vehicles that you need in order to replace the current ICE vehicle fleet.
I'm sorry, 20 million replaces the fleet?
You only need to make 20 million vehicles a year in order to replace the ICE fleet. And the reason for that is because you're using the higher utilization and the vehicle is lasting a whole lot longer. It's 5 to 8 times more utilization and it's going to last, 4 times plus longer. So the long-term sustainable replacement of ICE vehicles is 20 million vehicles a year. That doesn't mean that's what the demand is going to be, because once you have full self-driving vehicles that are, 25, 50 cents a mile, you're going to have a huge demand from people that can't travel now that will want to travel around the world. This is a worldwide type of a thing. And so you'll have a lot more demand for those vehicles. And so the vehicle demand will increase way beyond the 20 million vehicles a year.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you with this. If the price of a ride drops below 50 cents a mile to 25 cents a mile, and I think the price could drop to even 20 cents a mile and maybe less, then the demand for rides might go up.
Oh yeah.
My favorite example of this is, so I live in South Florida and Disney World is a popular place to go. Disney World and Universal Studios Orlando are very popular places to go for people here. I'm not a huge fan. I've been, but there's a lot of people here who like to go. And I think, generally, there's a lot of people who like to go to those places. So right now it's a 3-hour drive and you're probably going to get a hotel. So a weekend there is going to cost you a lot of money. Well, imagine that the boring company builds a tunnel under the Everglades from South Florida that, has a stop at Disney Springs, right? Right at the entrance or maybe even inside Disney. And it's an hour ride and it costs you $20 round trip on a minibus, right? All of a sudden, like, no one's going to drive right? People in South Florida are going to go to Disney a lot more frequently. So they're going to consume a lot more miles. Now they're going to consume, and some of them may ride in their own vehicle or in a personal robo-taxi. But I think a lot of people will say, why would I bother staying in a hotel? I'll go up for the day. I'll take the robo-taxi home at midnight or 11 o'clock at night or whatever, sleep in my own bed and go back the next day. And there are people who would do that 2-3 days a week, and you would massively increase the number of miles. And by the way, this is one of my side theories, and I haven't followed up on this, but I think buying stock in Disney is a pretty good idea, because you can just see the demand. And it's not just Disney, it's anything that's a destination. Anything that's a destination that people want to go to will scale massively. So, Brian Smith asks this. I'll turn this to you, Bruce. Says, I'm a Tesla owner in Super Bowl, but won't 80 million Teslas on the world's roads get a little boring, no pun intended, to look at? Do you think a world of 80 million Teslas will be boring?
If they were all Model 3 and Model Y, yes. But throw in a few Cybertrucks, and it's nothing like boring at all.
And Bruce,
Cybertrucks are going to be such a shock to people when they see them driving down streets. It's going to be shocking, but also it's going to be such a big not advertising, it's a marketing thing for Tesla. Right now, Model 3s, Model Ys, they kind of blend in a little bit. S's and X's, they kind of all blend in. You look closely and you can see the differences. But man, when that Cybertruck comes out, it's just going to be such a huge shock, and everybody's going to see it and they're going to go, whoa, what is that? And if people haven't heard about Tesla by then, which I'm sure everybody will have, they'll pay attention. They'll know what that is. And then you also have other vehicles coming out with the $20,000, $25,000 vehicles. Who knows what those will look like? So I don't think it'll be a boring type of a thing on the road. I think you'll have a lot of unique things. And I met up, it was kind of a side story, but I was coming back from the Bay Area to Lake Tahoe and stopped in Roseville to charge, and I was the only car there. And then one other car came up, and this other guy got out of the car, and we started chatting because, it's the middle of the night. We're just kind of sitting around talking. And he was showing off his car and what he had done to his Model 3. And it was pretty amazing. He had put wraps on it and had it, sparkling. He had purple, and things around it. He had lights on it. It was really tricked out. And that guy, it turns out, he'd taken out a loan in 2019 for $10,000 and turned that into $11 million today.
wow.
And how he did that was not just investing. He invested in Tesla, but then as soon as he saw the market going down because of the COVID type things, he took the money out of his Tesla options that he had, and he put put things against other companies, made a whole lot of money there. As soon as then the Tesla stock started going back up, he put it all back into Tesla options, and he just made a killing. So it was pretty amazing. So we told stories. It's the nice thing about the Tesla community. There's lots of stories to be told around.
Yes.
It's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So going off that, what will you guys do with your Tesla wealth to make the world a better place? And Bruce, I'll let you start because I know this is something you're very passionate about, and you're already working on something.
Yeah. So yeah, what I described earlier with the healthy soil biomes, that's something that I started off just with working with a couple of farmers, and now it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. It's like I can't even imagine what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be something that's worldwide. And I am getting into all of these new technologies that are just totally fascinating and bleeding edge type things that aren't quite ready yet, but I know they will be ready in like a year. And so I look at the X Prize associated with carbon removal, and the rules are coming out this Thursday on Earth Day. And there's going to be a webinar with Elon Musk and Peter Diamandis, who is the founder of the X Prize. and they're going to talk about the rules associated with it. Well, one of the milestones that they've already announced is that by April of 2022, they're going to announce the first 15 winners. And those 15 winners will get $1 million to then go further with this. And then the final prizes are announced in 2024. So it's a 4-year process to go from where we are to now. And so I look at technology that's developing. It's not developed yet, but it's amazing technology that is coming along. And for example, one of them is StoryFile, and practically nobody has heard about StoryFile, but it's going to be huge. Basically what they do is they interview somebody and record the answers to those questions. And then using AI, they're able to take that information and you can ask it any question you want. And it immediately jumps to the answer and you get the video of that person answering that question to you. And so the question needs to be, similar to that, but it doesn't need to be the exact same question. It just needs to be similar, and they use AI to figure that out. And so you don't have to listen to, hours of video in order to find the answer to your question. You just ask the question and you get the answer. And they're doing it with, they started off doing it with Holocaust survivors because they wanted to record the stories associated with the Holocaust survivors. And then they've been expanding it from there. The latest one that they have is quite fascinating. It's William Shatner. And okay, with Star Trek, what's the story? What's the story about this? What's the story? And I think he recorded his answers over a period of a week. Of sitting there in a studio answering these questions, and now you'll have the ability to ask him any question, and it immediately goes to the answer to the question that you asked. It's just an amazing technology made possible because of AI. So we're looking at using that and basically taking the experts that we have that know how to use the soil biology, which is basically going back and taking what the natural environment has done over millions and millions of years. They produced in our bodies a mix of bacteria and other things, microbes that provide us immunity. They digest our food. They do lots of things in our bodies that just allow our body to function. And the amazing thing is that most people don't realize, most people actually don't realize that, but the amazing thing that hardly anybody realizes that the same thing happens in soils. And there's a mix of bacteria and fungi that happen in soils and has developed over millions of years that allows plants to thrive. And in our agricultural fields, our conventional agriculture, we've been killing that. We till the soil, we expose it to the sunlight, the carbon comes out of the soil, we harvest the crops, they don't put the organic material back, and it becomes essentially a dead soil. And you have regions of around the world that have had this over hundreds and thousands of years, and they're just arid. Now they're deserts, and they call it desertification. And it used to be lush areas. You think of the Bible days, and they're talked about the Garden of Eden. Well, the Garden of Eden is now a desert because of this agriculture that's been happening. So my push on this is not to invent these things, but to get them into a form that people can use. And one of the things that I was told early in my profession is that what they tell me is, Bruce, you're really good at putting a square peg inside of a square hole. And it sounds pretty simple, but you think about it and you think most people will take a square peg and put it on the hole and they'll hit it with a hammer and hammer it and try to make it go through, and it doesn't go through. And I come up to it and look at, okay, you just got to turn the square peg and it drops right into the square hole. Well, that's the way I look at doing this. This is an idea that's time has come. We have all the technology to make it happen. And so it's just a matter of lining it up and making it go in. And so that's what I'm working on. And it's going to be a huge worldwide thing, and it's going to involve a team of lots and lots of people. And it's just an exciting type of a thing to do.
So, Jordan, before I answer your question, I just want to, Brian Smith, my friend Brian asked, he said, I'm Cybertruck order number 4800, and I ordered the Cyberlander. What do you think about it? I want to ask you, Jordan, first. What do you think about the Cyberlander? First of all, do both of you know what I'm talking about?
No. What is the Cyberlander?
Bruce, do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, it's not something you can officially order. I know that.
Okay, so I think it's a reservation. Cyberlander is basically like a camper thing you would put in the back of a Cybertruck that it's almost like a clown car thing that it folds up.
It's not Tesla. It's a separate third party, right?
Right. It's a third party thing that you put in the bed of the Cybertruck, and it will expand up, and you'd basically have a place to sleep, almost like a tent or a camper. Folds in, and I already told Brian what I think of it. What do you think of the idea, Bruce?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I also think that what Tesla is going to be doing is producing a van. And I know you've talked about this before, but the next thing after the Cybertruck is, I think, something like a cyber van. If the Cybertruck works out well and functions well and everybody likes it, then they'll do a cyber van, and that cyber van will have lots of features and lots of options associated with it. One of them will be as a camping van. And the other will be as a delivery van and as a bus, and there'll be all kinds of applications for that type of a vehicle. So,
yeah, cyber RV. Jordan,
Yeah.
what do you think of the idea?
Yeah, I love it. I'm a little bit deeper down on the list, so I haven't started looking at accessories yet. But when I get a little bit closer to, I'll definitely take a look at that. And that sounds awesome. I definitely want to travel and camp in the Cybertruck and use it the way it's intended to. So.
Now, Brian and I were messaging each other during the Cybertruck reveal, and Brian, the guy who asked the question, my neighbor, and he got his order in he ordered a tri-motor before I got my dual motor in. So he's ahead of me. He's getting his, assuming they released the tri-motor at the same time or before they released the dual motor, he gets his before I get mine. So
what number do you think you are, Warren?
I was in the first hour. I don't know that I have a number. I'm not sure that that's correct, that you can know what number you are. But I ordered within the first hour, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to have one of the first 10,000 Cybertrucks.
Yeah, I know from that numbering system, it's a little bit unclear whether how accurate it is, but with that system, I'm about 7,000. So yeah.
I haven't bothered to calculate what my number really is. Where are we, Jordan?
Well, if you want to talk about any plans, philanthropy
right.
you have, and
right. So what I plan to do with my earned Tesla wealth.
Yes.
So I mentioned this at the beginning. I think we need to be like Elon. I don't have something exciting that I want to do. Thank you, Jan, for your support. I don't have something. I already live a comfortable life, and my children's college is already paid for. And if I have more money, then, I'll be able to make sure my kids have a place to live and they're taken care of. But I expect to have more than I need for any of that. So I would really like to plow it into some kind of investment startup, ideally, that builds something that addresses a problem that needs to be solved. So Elon figured transportation needed to be solved. Elon figured that launch needed to be solved. Brain diseases needed to be cured. Tunneling would solve traffic problems. Those are taken care of. I don't need to work on those. I think housing is the next big thing. I think that there's real potential for housing startups to come up with ways of providing housing at much lower cost, with better energy efficiency, with a better making life better for the consumer. So I was actually I'm texting even with a friend of mine today. I have a friend in South Florida who he and I are now starting to talk about that we might do this startup. And I think we're on the same page that we're thinking we're going to do something between Orlando and Canaveral, where we would build a prototype apartment building, the alpha prototype, see how that works out. Then if we're comfortable with how that works, we apply the learning from building the first one to building the second one better. And after the beta prototype, then maybe we build 10 of them. And what we were sort of talking about was each apartment building would have 10 units. And again, this could change over time, but we build one with 10 units, then we build another with 10 units, and we learn from the first one. How can we build this thing better? How can we build it more efficiently? How can we make it something that's a better place to live? We're talking about the robo minibus, that instead of people needing to own vehicles, like if it's designed and marketed to students at University of Central Florida and people working at Canaveral, then we have robo minibuses that are a part of the apartment complex, and they drive people to UCF and they drive people to Canaveral. And by being in between Orlando and Canaveral, where we find low cost land, and we're able to do this at lower cost and find a a jurisdiction where the buildings, the zoning departments or whatever are more friendly to innovation. And just that's roughly the big idea. The other big idea that I'm working on is I'm working on whether I can find a way to form a fund to invest in Elon's two smaller companies, the Boring Company and Neuralink. And that's something I don't want to go into depth on in this call, but and I actually think it's possible to revolutionize venture capital. So let me talk about that. Let me talk about that really quick. So the way venture capital works now, a typical venture capital fund, you will probably have to invest at least $100,000 and maybe a lot more than that. They are going to charge you a 2% management fee every year. It may tail off after the first 4 or 5 years, but you're paying 2% a year. And maybe Bruce knows something about this too. I'll be interested in hearing what you know about venture capital. And then at the end of when it's all done, if the venture capital fund made a profit, the people who run the fund take 10% off the top or 20% off the top. They take what's called 20% carried interest. So I think it's possible to design a fund. And part of the way it works is you're basically betting that the people who run this fund are going to make good choices on which companies to invest in. They don't necessarily ask you which companies you'd like to invest in. They tell you, put your money in this fund. We're going to choose 20 or 30 companies. We're going to invest. Half of them are going to fail. 40% are going to tread water. And we're just hoping 10%, 2 or 3 of these companies will really be successful. And that's where we're going to make our money. And historically, a lot of venture capitalists have done fairly well with that model. But when you're going into a fund, you have no idea what the guy running this fund is any good at it. And maybe he was good at it, and he's not good at it anymore. So I think a better model would be to identify companies. There's different stages. There's like angel investing, where you're investing in companies that are very beginning. Then you're investing at sort of fairly early stages of the company, but it's actually off the ground and doing something. And then they're further along. So I would say like SpaceX is arguably now it's probably one of the largest companies in the world, right? It's worth in the ballpark of $100 billion. It's not really a small company anymore. Neuralink and Boring Company are much smaller companies. So they're not profitable yet. They don't necessarily have clear business models yet, but they look like they're promising. So let's suppose you identified company at their stage somewhere. And I think Boring Company is a little ahead of Neuralink, but you identify a company in that stage and you say, I'm forming a fund that's going to invest in this one company. So you're not betting on my ability to choose. You're not betting on my ability to choose a bunch of companies to invest in. You're saying, okay, this fund, forget about Warren for a second. There's this fund here that I can invest in that's targeting this one company that I like. And I want to take a shot on this company. You've eliminated a lot of overhead because you don't need a team of people to evaluate 30 companies, right? And so you shouldn't have to pay as much in management fees and carried interest in order to get into that kind of investing. I'm not saying it revolutionizes all of venture capital investing because it doesn't solve the angel investing problem, the early stage company problem. But once a company has appeared in some form and isn't publicly traded yet, this might have been a better way for, let's say, Lucid. Like, I'm not a fan of Lucid Motors, but this might have been a better way for Lucid Motors to raise money than the other things that they've done to raise money. This might be a better way for a lot of startup companies to get to a certain stage and say, hey, you go start up a fund for us and tell people this is the company we're investing in. And it might be possible to revolutionize venture capital investing, which number one is better for people who want to invest in venture capital. And number two, it's better for the startups because they raise their money more efficiently. So Bruce, do you have any thoughts on venture capital?
Yeah. First of all, let me say that I've learned that I need to focus on things. And so, for example, with investments, I've just focused on Tesla. I don't even try to get off into other things, just Tesla. And I just focus on that. And now I'm working with this healthy soil biomes. And so I'm focusing on that. But I do hear other things. And for example, I think relative to what you're talking about, if you haven't, you should watch the All In podcast. And those guys talk about the revolution that's happening within venture capital and how dramatic it's changing and how it's democratizing, and it just goes on and on. And there are dramatic changes that are happening just along the lines of what you're talking about there, of allowing small people to get into people without a lot of money to get into investing in these companies. Because right now it has been such that the only people that can invest in these early companies and make all these monies are the people that already have money. And so what that does is it disenfranchises people and it demoralizes people and it just knocks them down. The people that don't have money and can't get into these funds, they can't. And so they can't get ahead, and the rich people get richer and the poor people get poorer. And so what they're trying to do is look at how can you get more and more people involved in this. And one of the ideas that they came up with the other day that I thought was a great idea is that, a group of people that have companies and all that have lots and lots of money, hey, put aside $2,000 for every person in the United States and invest that into like an IRA type of an account. And they can't take the money out until they retire. And if you do that at $2,000 when somebody's born, they'll have enough money to retire just from that $2,000 when they retire. And because they put the money into something that's not going to just grow, 5 or 8% a year, but it's going to grow 15, 20% a year. And it's just, so they're trying to do that. So I think there's some great opportunities there. I just don't have the bandwidth to get into that type of a thing. A couple of things I would like to point out though is I know I watch, I mentioned the All In podcast. That's one I like to watch. Another one I like to watch is Steve and Mark Ryan. And one of the things that I remember listening to him, over the last, since Cybertruck came out. So that's been 2019 now. And what he talks about is how he's trying to build up money in order to be able to help 1 billion people. And so he's building up his wealth so he can help 1 billion people. And I thought, well, that's a nice goal. And, it's a nice thing to happen. And then, in the last couple of months, essentially, I have found a way to take the money that I'm earning and help 8 billion people throughout the world. Basically, everybody in the world can be helped by this healthy soil biomes. And so it kind of fell into my lap as to a way to use my money to help all these people. And then the other point I wanted to make is we haven't talked about shorter term price for Tesla. And I've gone on Twitter and said that I'm 99% confident that Tesla will reach $2,000 in March of 2022. And people think I'm crazy, which is fine. And I've told Jordan before in interviews, people think I'm crazy or they thought I was crazy and now I'm crazy rich. But, I just look at all these things that are going to happen. And I just see that $2,000 is pretty much the minimum of where Tesla is going to be at March. With the options that I've been buying, and these options I've been buying with the idea, okay, I need to have more money in order to do the carbon capture and to solve climate change throughout the world. So I need to have more money, not because of my own need for money, but because of that. So every time Tesla dips significantly, I get really close to having a margin call. And then I borrow more money against margin right at that point. And I buy more Tesla stock options. And the options that I've been buying recently have been for like $1,700 strike prices out, expiring in March through June of 2022. And if Tesla actually reaches $2,000 in March of 22, my current, I think I'm about 42x from my initial investment. My 42x will grow to about 150x at that point in time. And then I'll have the money that I need in order to solve climate change. So that's just a little side story.
So
Power leaps.
Yep.
So let me be clear. I think I agree. If you agree with me and Bruce and I, that Tesla is going to be worth $20,000 a share in say 2025, and you think, okay, what else would I invest in today? How much would I be willing to pay today for an asset that will be worth $20,000 in 4 years? And the answer would be a lot more than $2,000 a share. Mm-hmm. So there's a what I think the stock is actually worth, which is I think the stock is currently worth at least $2,500 a share and maybe $5,000 a share. And I think it will clearly be worth $5,000 a share or $2,000 a share by March 2022. There's what I think it's worth, and there's what the market does. And the problem is that on a daily basis, the share price is not determined by Bruce and I. Like I don't buy stock on a daily basis. I have my stock, and I don't have a lot of money I don't have a lot of ammo in the chamber to buy more. I do accumulate cash over time, and I probably will buy more Tesla stock at some point, but at a certain point, I just can't buy more. And my purchases are not driving the market. What's driving the market price on a daily basis is short-term traders. And short-term traders are not thinking 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 2 years down the road. They're thinking in the next hour, in the next day, maybe. And so the reason that I don't have faith in a strategy that counts on the stock reaching a certain price by a certain point in the near future is the short-term traders are driving that. What will drive the share price up? And I do think, like, here's the interesting question. Let's suppose Tesla delivers 1 million vehicles in 2021. I'm not saying it will happen. My ballpark number is around 930,000 vehicles, but I think 1 million vehicles is possible. It just depends on how fast Berlin and Giga Texas spin up. If they spin up faster, then there'll be more vehicles. The fact that S and X haven't delivered yet is slowing the number a little. You know, I think that it's a fairly small volume vehicle, S and X, so it's not a huge difference, but that's taking away from the number that'll be done. But if they did deliver 1 million vehicles in 2021, that would be a pretty large sign that would be harder for other long-term investors to ignore. There's a group of long-term investors out there that I'm going to call them the Warren Buffetts. They're not really I'm not speaking specifically about Warren Buffett, but there's a lot of big money out there that at a certain point can't deny where Tesla's going. And when they can no longer deny where Tesla's going, when it's so plain on its face that Tesla's going where we think it's going, at some point they have to buy more stock. They can't just sit on the sidelines anymore. And when other big long-term players start buying more Tesla stock, that's what'll drive the stock price up. And it's really hard to know what's going to get those people to move. And I can't know it. And that's why I don't play the leap game. You know, that's one of the reasons I don't play the leap game. The other thing is when I look at the prices, I'm not convinced that the buy-in, I don't understand. I just flat out don't understand the options market well enough. When I look at the numbers, I'm not sure. Let's say I think Tesla's going to hit $1,500 in, let's say, March of 2023, which is when I think a leap would mature right now. That would be the strike price for a leap, let's say. And I look at the chart and I buy that option. If it hits 1,500, I'm not sure if I made more money on the option than if I just bought the stock. And I don't know how to do that calculation, and it's too complicated of a calculation for me, so I don't bother. I just buy the stock and don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's actually a fairly simple computation. Most people think of options as being a short-term play. You know, you buy an option and then you sell the option. You buy the option, you sell the option. Short-term play. And I don't use options that way. I use it as a way to exercise into the stock. Because what I've learned is, especially with Tesla, is that when I buy an option and it increases in value a lot, well, if I sell it, I have to pay a lot of income tax. And so what I do is instead I exercise it into stock, which is not a taxable sale. And so I don't get any income tax payment that I have to make. And then I own the stock. And then in order to avoid paying income tax, I don't sell the stock. I just borrow on margin against the stock in order to have the money that I need. And that's what I plan to do with helping with healthy soil biomes, is I'm just going to borrow the money on margin in order to have the money that I need for that. Yeah.
Right.
So it's actually so what I do when I'm looking at an option and a leap to buy it is I compare, okay, what would happen if I buy the option and compared to if I buy the stock. And then I compare those two. And most people will just say, well, okay, this is the price it's going to be at the time of expiration. But you can't look at it as the price because the price is going to vary. And so I have my 99% confidence level, I have my 70% confidence level, and I have my 50% confidence level for that point in time. And then I buy the options so that I will not lose money with my 99% confidence interval. However, if the stock goes to 70, I'll make a ton of money. And if to my 70% confidence interval, if it goes to my 50% confidence interval, then I'll make tons and tons of money. And so that's what's happened so far is that. The other thing, and just to elaborate on your point, Warren, you cannot estimate when the stock is going to be a certain price based on what its value is. We all agree that there's more value there than the stock market recognizes. So what I do is I look at what the market will think the stock is worth at a certain point, and what will influence what they think it will be worth at that point in time. And that's how I estimate then what I think the stock will be worth. And I think by March of next year, you'll have the Berlin factory up and running, spitting out tons and tons of vehicle. You'll have Austin up and running, spitting out tons. People think that China is just going to keep producing the number of vehicles. They're still adding on over there. They haven't stopped adding on, and they have plans to add on even more and buy land next to them and add on even more. That factory is going to get to be huge, and people just don't understand that. And so when you have all three of those factories producing 1 million plus a year in 2022, you're going to have several million vehicles a year produced in 2022. It's going to be crazy, and people are going to start seeing that at the beginning of 2022, I think. And then the other thing I think is people discount it, but the Cybertruck being out on streets and running around, driving around, that's going to have a huge impact on the price of Tesla stock. And then the other one is full self-driving, with that being rolled out and people seeing what it can do and how effective it is. That's just going to be huge. And now the last thing that I want to add on the price and what's going to happen on the price, and maybe this doesn't happen by March, but it's going to happen, is one of the estimates that Kathy Wood has put out there is that half of the S&P 500 is going to be disrupted. Well, if half of the S&P 500 is going to be disrupted and starts going down in value, where are people going to put the money? They're going to put it in stocks like Tesla. And that's going to have a huge impact on Tesla stock as well. So that's how I get to something above $2,000 a share in March of 2022.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty clear. I don't think I can predict how the market will value Tesla. Even like when I say my number, like $20,000 in 2026, I'm saying what I think the stock will be worth, not what the market will value it at, because what I find is the market lags Tesla. And I think there's a point in time with certain companies where the market starts to get ahead of a company. So if you remember, Cisco Systems was on a run. I don't know if you remember this, Bruce. There was a point in time where Cisco Systems was just like crazy overpriced. I should say priced very high on a price earnings ratio basis. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at it saying, well, who are their competitors? Why, I could buy this competitor, like smaller competitors. Foundry Networks and F5 Networks were two companies I bought stock in. I was like, it doesn't make sense to buy Cisco Systems at this high price. I bought these other two companies. I made a ridiculous amount of money. This was my early playing stocks. I made a ton of money on F5 Networks and Foundry Networks because they made basically similar products or in the same category as Cisco, but their price earnings ratios weren't so insanely high. And they actually grew faster because Cisco was already big. So I think you could get to a point kind of like what Bruce is saying, where a lot of S&P 500 companies start struggling. Certainly the car companies are going to struggle. The oil companies are going to struggle. We're going to see some other companies struggle. I think Uber and Lyft are dead. As other examples.
Basically, anybody who's not using AI and machine learning is going to be struggling.
Well, I just think there's specific industries that Tesla destroys. Yeah. And not just Tesla, but some other businesses like AI. And so it may be that Tesla continuing to grow as other companies really, as more and more companies start to struggle, Tesla gets that Cisco halo and the market gets ahead of Tesla. And if that happens, the share price could go like, so if you and I think the stock is worth $20,000 in 2025, the share price could go to 50 based on the overvaluation that happens when the market overreacts to the situation. So I do think that's another scenario that I don't normally price in. But so when I say the stock could go to $100,000 a share in 2030, if it gets that Apple Cisco halo and everybody says, well, that's the one, then it could go that high.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing is, you look at, like you did, and I think it's a good analysis. You look at Cisco, and there are other companies that can do the same thing. And there's not a big barrier to entry. With Tesla, there's a huge barrier to entry in that the only way you can reduce the cost of the vehicles is to build lots of them. Well, the only way you can build lots of them is to have a low enough price so you can sell lots of them. There's just no way that other companies can catch up.
Yes, 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 yes. No, I love what Gary Black will say. Well, other companies will make self-driving vehicles. Will they make them with an operating cost of 7 cents a mile? Like, it's almost like that. That's, I don't understand. I don't know if Gary doesn't get that, or he just doesn't want to get it, or he doesn't want to admit it. But if your self-driving vehicle costs $1 a mile to operate, and Tesla's self-driving vehicle costs 7 cents a mile to operate, well, that's not really a competition, is it?
No, not at all. And then the other thing is the self-driving, all full self-driving are not going to be created equal. Okay. I am sorry. The Tesla is going to be just miles and miles ahead of any other competition as far as what they can handle and in all situations. The approach that they're using with full visual and full, machine learning and AI, that is just going to knock everybody out of the park, and nobody's even close to that because they don't have the data and they don't have the technology.
Yeah, no, Tesla's accumulating the data faster and their lead is growing. Yep. And other companies are just barely beginning to do that, if they're doing it at all. The other thing I wanted to mention, damn it. Oh, I lost it. Whatever it was, I lost it. Jordan, where are we?
Well, that's all I had written down. We pretty much addressed. So if you guys have anything else you wanted to bring up, but you pretty much answered all the topics I had listed.
Okay, well, if people have questions, please ask them in the chat. I probably will have something else that will pop in my head. I guess, I want to ask you, Bruce, what you think about Dojo as a service. Do you see that business model coming? I mean, I have answers myself, but I'm curious to hear yours. Unless you want me to say mine first, and then you can go after me.
Just briefly, I think that's going to be just another form of revenue for Tesla. AI is reaching now more and more and more and more things, and that machine learning AI is going to just reach further and further, and it's going to be a huge business. And I think Tesla will knock it out of the park with regard to their technology and being able to do that. And not just that they have the technology, but like we talked about, they will apply it to full self-driving. They'll make that really great. They'll also then be selling it to other people, that technology and that processing ability. And then they'll get better at it, and they'll get better at it. And they will grow leaps and bounds as far as the amount they can learn from being able to do that. And other companies just won't be able to catch up, because soon that AI will be figuring out how to do AI. And if you don't have the AI to figure out how to do AI, then you're just left behind in the dust. So I think it'll be a huge revenue source for Tesla in the years ahead.
Okay, I'll just say I see specific applications for Dojo as a service. One of them is for Neuralink. That Neuralink will be reading signals from the neurons in the brain and sending signals into the brain. And Neuralink will, I think AI, Dojo, machine learning, I think Dojo, once Dojo is finished with FSD to the point where FSD is, 1,000 times better than the average human, then it's not as needed in improving self-driving anymore, because you've reduced the number of fatal accidents from, 1 million in the world to 1,000, right? And 1,000's bad, and you still want to improve it, but that's no longer as that high of a priority. And you start to think about what else can you do with that AI engine and machine learning training engine. And I think understanding the signals coming out of the brain, and understanding what happens when you send signals back into the brain, and the ability to query the fleet. You have a fleet of Neuralink chips in 100 brains, and 1,000 brains, and 10,000, 100,000, 1 million brains. And the inference chip, the chip that's in the skull, is reading the signals and interpreting them. And at some point that chip has AI in it, and it's learning to interpret the signals, what's coming out, and understanding it, what's coming in, and how it reacts to those signals. And then when there's a question, when something doesn't match up, when something isn't right, that's the equivalent of an intervention. And that gets sent up to Dojo to try to query the fleet and see what other chips are experiencing the same anomaly, and how do we learn from that and do better at that. So that I think is big. And I think robots to do dangerous work, like climbing roofs, like going in, like spacewalks. I think AI training for those applications and vision in those applications will be huge. There were a couple of questions here.
Before you get off of that, so going back to your Neuralink and AI, one of the big issues that they're going to have that AI will really, really help with is actually getting the Neuralink installed. Right now, they're talking about 1,000 connections inside the brain on the outside surfaces of the brain. Well, they're doing that with a robot.
Yes.
So when AI gets even better, they'll be able to figure out how to get those wires, not just on the outside part of the brain, but on the inside part of the brain, in order to be able to, control more of and have the brain interfacing more with more things. And that can only be done with AI. There's no way you can do it with any other means.
Cool. Well, I think I could see where you could learn from how this implant worked, and you do 100 implants and then you see how it worked, and then you send that back up to Dojo and say, okay, how can we do better next time? I could see that making sense.
Well, but you talked about the robotics. The robotics associated with going in and attaching those wires, those super wires inside the brain, that has to be done by AI.
I like it.
You can't figure out all the possibilities and things of how you're gonna get to connect where you need to connect without AI.
Okay, Jordan, are you following the comments in the chat? Do you have a question for us? I can scroll back. I had one. I mean, I had one, which there were two people asked the same basic question, Bruce. What do you think AI Day will be?
I think it'll review pretty much. Dave Lee on Investing had a really good, kind of a rundown of what he thinks that will happen on AI Day. And I think he was pretty right on. Is that at that point in time, Dojo will not be ready for commercial use, but Dojo will be ready to demonstrate how it can be used for commercial use by others. And so they'll be able to demonstrate that at AI, because Tesla does not do days when they don't show things that actually are in existence. For example, when they did Battery Day, I knew from the beginning that they weren't going to do Battery Day until they were actually producing the batteries. And that's what happened. They didn't do Battery Day until they were actually producing the battery. And the same thing's going to happen with AI Day. They're not going to have AI Day until they have Dojo running.
And they didn't do Autonomy Day until they already had the chips in the cars.
Yep. Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Bruce. Do you see a Tesla depression coming from all the disruption?
Tesla depression? What do you mean depression?
Do you see the Tesla is going to disrupt a lot of industries? Yeah, right. I think you and I both agree with that. Do you see that causing a depression in the world economy or the U.S. economy?
I don't see it causing a depression. I see it causing an abundance, because you're going to have some depression in the economy, because you'll have a less expensive car, so you won't have to buy as an expensive a car as you did before. The battery vehicle will be a whole lot less expensive to operate than an ICE vehicle. And so yes, that's going to depress or have deflationary type of an impact. Not non-inflationary. That's one thing. Everybody's scared about inflation. Inflation this, inflation that, inflation that. We're going to have inflation. No, we're going to have deflation. I'm sorry, but we're going to have deflation because of technology. And technology is going to make things so much less expensive, and therefore we're going to have more abundance, and we're going to have deflation, and we'll have more money to do other things with.
Hey, Bruce, can you give yourself any more light on your face?
Yeah, just hold on a second.
Okay. So,
and sorry, Warren, I want to thank you real quick for having me on. I actually got to run.
Okay.
So I'll let you guys continue, but Bruce, was good chatting with you as well. I got to run. Take care, guys.
All right. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. So, Bruce, I don't know if you want to take this question. Do you think the next Tesla AI chip will be 3 times faster, 30 times faster, or more? And I think we're referring to the chip that goes in the car.
Right, the full self-driving chip. Yeah. Tesla said 3 times. It'll probably beat that. I don't know if it'll get to 30 times, but it'll probably beat the 3 times.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with you. I think 3 to 5. So let's see. Philip and I we're on Jessica's live stream one time. Philip asks, what do you think Tesla pays for their data connectivity for cars each year? Will that cost go down when Starlink does backhaul for cell providers? I don't have those numbers. Do you have a sense of how much they spend on data connectivity?
I know how much I pay for it. $10 a month. My guess is that is probably not a moneymaker or a money loser for Tesla in the big picture. It's probably kind of, here's the cost and they just pass it on to us. So it's not, yeah.
Here's a question that's definitely for you. Do you have to pay a margin loan back?
Some people say you do. No, you don't. The only time you have to pay back a margin loan is if you sell the stock or if the value of the stock goes down below your maintenance requirement. So if you, like, for example, I'm with Schwab, and with Schwab, I have it depends on how you look at it. I have a 40% maintenance requirement, meaning that I can borrow up to 60% of the value of my stock. So I can borrow up to 60% of my stock, and as long as the stock doesn't go down below that amount, I never have to repay. And the nice thing about that, at least the way the tax laws are right now, they may change in the future. Who knows what happens there? But right now my stock is like 97, 98% short-term capital gains. And so if I sell it, there's a huge price to pay on income tax right now. But that's going to go down over time as it becomes a long-term capital gains, but it's still going to be significant.
Okay.
The nice thing about it is, just to finish up on that, when I die and it goes on to my kids, that basis is reestablished at the current then value. So they don't have to pay that capital gains. They'll have to pay death taxes or inheritance taxes type thing on it, but not estate taxes, but not capital gains taxes.
Right. So Ryan asks, what was the question? Oh, sorry. Do you have any thoughts on Tesla getting involved in Bitcoin? This is from Philip.
I look at it as, people ask me, and putting it a different way, people ask me, well, have you bought Tesla? Have you bought Bitcoin? Have you bought Bitcoin? I said, yeah, I have about $250,000 worth of Bitcoin through Tesla. But I haven't bought any directly through my own purchasing, but Tesla has a lot of Bitcoin, and so I have a lot of Bitcoin.
And do you think Tesla will at some point convert more cash into Bitcoin? I think that's Philip's question.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll do that. They may accumulate. Well, they have already accumulated more just because it's worth more. But over time, they'll probably accumulate even more through selling things and using Bitcoin as a means of transferring money.
Okay, let's see. Where was I? Let me go to the latest questions and see. I don't understand this question. Maybe you do. How would Bruce handle his maintenance requirement changing to 100%? I don't even know what's a maintenance requirement, Bruce?
So it's on the margin. If for example, Schwab came out and said, hey, you have to have 100% of the value of your stock. Basically, you can't borrow anything against the stock. And one of the reasons why I went to Schwab from Fidelity is because I have a lot more confidence in Schwab as being realistic and reasonable associated with that. And if I see Tesla going to $20,000 a share in 2025, I'm not worried at all about having to maintain a certain amount in value in stock in Tesla. It just doesn't bother me at all.
Okay. Another question from Philip. What's your threshold for comfort? 5% margin, 20% margin?
Yeah, so I try to maintain it in fairly good times at 20 to 30% margin. But I must say, when these dips have happened recently, I've been pretty close to 60% borrowing against my stock.
Okay. Oh, this is a good question that I like, and I don't know if you have macroeconomic thoughts. Tactical Tesla asks, we are printing trillions. I think he's referring to the Federal Reserve printing trillions of dollars of money, the growth in M1. His question is, how will that create deflation? I'll turn the question around. Do you see, because Kathy Wood talks about the deflationary effect of rapid increases in technology. How do you see on the one hand, money printing, the other hand, technological change? How do you see that affecting inflation and or deflation?
I see it being a net deflation as opposed to a net inflation, just because of the huge technological advances that are happening. Tesla is one, with EVs being less expensive than ICE vehicles, but the other one is the one I'm dealing with, for example, in agriculture. Well, using these methods, a crop can yield twice as much or up to 5 times as much per acre as it does now using conventional means. And that's by using basically technology so we can understand more about the biology in the soil. You can dramatically increase the yields. You don't need to have as much farmland producing crops. You don't need to spend as much money to produce better quality crops. And that's going to happen just throughout lots and lots of industries. And so I think net, we're going to have a deflation over time and not inflation.
Right. So I agree that technology has a deflationary effect. However, I think that the money printing is out of control and it may overwhelm. Like in dollar terms, I think we're going to see inflation. In Bitcoin terms, we're going to see massive deflation. In Tesla terms, like the value, I think Tesla will rise because it's going to survive the problems. Oh, so here was a question. I think this is a question I'm comfortable answering, but Justin asks, has Elon ever confirmed they will focus the majority of cars produced to robo-taxi versus consumer purchase? So my answer to you, Justin, is that Elon one time tweeted that Tesla would effectively stop selling cars, and then he quickly clarified, it's not that we'll stop selling cars, it's that the clearing price of the car will be so high that very few people will choose to buy a car. So he did say it. I want to say he said it in 2019. Do you remember when he said it, Bruce?
Yeah, what happened around what was it called? When they did the full self-driving day. They didn't call it full self-driving day, but whatever they called it. Right around then, Tesla had, and Elon specifically, had a lot of criticism from people. They said, well, you're changing your tune. You're going from producing cars and making money to now saying you're going to make a lot of money by full self-driving and robo-taxis. And you need to not do that because it's going to damage your sales of cars. And I think he got, right people in Tesla, and now he realizes that he can't really talk about that. We can project as to what's going to happen, but Elon can't talk about that because they need to sell the cars in order to build the factories so they can build more cars, so they can sell more cars, so that they can then get over that chasm to having full self-driving and being able to just do full self-driving. But they have to be able to leap over that, and they rely on sales of vehicles, so they can't talk about that part.
Okay. So Beacon asks, and there's 2 questions about the SNX refresh. Beacon asks, do you believe Tesla is ready to release the refreshed Model X and X refresh with the materials ready to go, but they're holding off for that last piece of the puzzle, with that being the FSD package? And another person asked, will Q1 earnings be disappointing due to the Model S and X refresh? So let's take that question first. Do you think that the Model S and X refresh delay will have a significant negative impact on Q1 earnings, and what impact do you think that'll have?
There were hardly any S and X produced and sold in Q1. So I don't think it'll have an impact at all because there were so many other cars that were produced.
Right.
I don't think it'll have an impact.
So my take on it is the average selling price and the margin on S and X, I think, are higher than Y and 3. And although S and X are becoming a smaller part of the business, it's not a positive that S and X were not produced and not sold. So I think that will have a slight negative impact. I think the increase in sales overall will overwhelm that problem, and we'll see higher earnings as a result, but it won't be as good as it could have been. And then just sort of generally, do you have a thought as to why S and X haven't been released, the refreshed S and X haven't been released? Have you heard anything? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is I have a Plaid Model X on order and I'd really like to have it. But it's delayed. So my account still says it's going to be delivered in April. I doubt that that's going to happen since it's the 20th of April now, but it still says it's going to be delivered in April.
Okay.
As far as why it's being delayed, I don't know. You know, there's lots of things that Elon has kind of hinted that there are issues that they need to resolve, and what those issues are, we really don't know. Are they supply issues? Are they, you know, little technical details that they need to resolve? I don't know, but they're working on the details and it'll be coming out. It's just not out yet.
Okay. So we have a question here, and I think I know the answer to this question, although it might be a little different. Breakneck Trent asks, I have $10,000 to invest, Tesla or something else? I have a feeling your answer is Tesla 2-year leaps, but what's your answer? I don't answer for you. That's just my guess.
I don't, first of all, I don't give investment advice, and I tell people not to do what I've done. That's just my standard answer. Don't do what I've done, and I don't give investment advice.
Yeah.
I try to share what I've done in order, you know, if it makes sense to other people and they can understand it, then they can follow it. That's fine, but they need to understand it. And one of the things I do in my pinned tweet on the Twitter account is basically says, if you cannot predict reliably and demonstrate to yourself that you can predict reliably what the value of the Tesla stock will be at a certain point in time, then do not invest in leaps and do not invest in call options. I've demonstrated to myself that I'm comfortable enough with what I can do in estimating those values that I'm comfortable in doing leaps, because I've been so successful in estimating where Tesla is going to be.
Yeah. So I'm going to give my answer, which is similar to Bruce's answer. I'm not in the business of giving investment advice. If you need professional investment advice, you should get a professional investment advisor. I can tell you what I think the stock's going to do or what I think the company is going to do. I'm far less confident what I think the stock is going to do than what I think the company will be worth. And the challenge for asking me or Bruce to tell you how to invest your money is we don't know your personal situation. Will you need the money? Will you need the money in a year? Will you need the money in 10 years? Or you're not planning on taking the money out for 50 years? That changes things. What's your risk profile? How much risk are you willing to take? There's all kinds of questions that go into that you really need to talk to a professional investment advisor. If I have $10,000 to invest, I can tell you what I've done every time I've had that decision. I've bought Tesla stock. So that's my answer to that. So Bruce, let me move on to the next question. Will Q1 show that we are entering the steep part of the S curve?
No, I think what it'll show is that we are approaching the steep part of the S curve, not that we're in the steep part of the S curve. I don't see that the steep part of the S curve starts until Tesla has the $25,000 vehicle on the road and being sold. That's when the steep part of the S curve starts.
That's pretty much my answer. When they start spooling up the 2023 compact, yeah, that's when we're entering the steep part of the S curve. We're approaching it, and the curve is accelerating. It's curving up, but we're not in the steep part yet.
Nope.
So I agree with you on that. Somebody asked who's manufacturing the chip. I believe that Samsung in Austin is manufacturing the chip. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Let's see. Let me see if we have any other questions here.
Actually, it's not clear if it's from Austin, but it is Samsung, and Samsung does have a facility in Austin, so it could be in Austin, but we don't know.
Okay, so Jonathan says, and this is a question for me, but I might ask you to answer it first. Warren, I know you fear a monopoly suit against Tesla, but I don't think that will happen for at least the next decade because climate crisis is too important to break them up and stymie momentum. Thoughts? So I'm going to address this first because the question was addressed to me. So it's not that I necessarily fear a monopoly lawsuit against Tesla. I fear that governments in one form or another will create problems for Tesla, and antitrust is one of the ways that could manifest itself. Not the only way. I do not believe that governments give the tiniest crap about the climate crisis. I think that they use the climate crisis to scare voters and people into supporting their ridiculous policies that generally have nothing to do with climate. So if Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Donald Trump or anybody else actually cared about the climate change, then they probably would bring troops home from 177 countries. because the US military actually emits a lot of CO2. So, and the same thing would apply to any other country that says they care about climate change. If you looked at their own policies and how much CO2 their governments emit, then smaller government would emit less CO2. But they never do that. Government never shrinks, even though government is the biggest. The US federal government is the biggest CO2 emitter in the world. And their answer is to make it bigger. So I don't buy the climate crisis thing. But I do think that there are risks to Tesla from government in various ways, not just the US government, the Chinese government, European governments, state governments. There's all kinds of risks. We saw that with the Fremont factory in the California state and the Alameda County government. I think that in terms of the antitrust risk, I think that's fairly small because Facebook could face antitrust actions and hasn't really. And there's a lot of companies, Google, it seems like the engine of antitrust litigation from government has died down. But I do think Tesla could potentially become a market power like no other before it. And I think the smart move for Tesla would be to break up the company themselves in ways that they want to break up before government breaks them up. So for example, spinning off the robo-taxi network in an IPO so that the robo-taxi network is a separate company. And I don't think that happens right away. I think that happens 2026, 2027, 2028. Spinning off Tesla China as a separate company, spinning off Tesla Europe as a separate company. If you separate the companies, then if China decides to be a problem and China is its own company, then the Chinese government problem doesn't create a problem for Tesla North America and Tesla Europe. So I think there's certain ways that Tesla can protect itself from all kinds of government problems by breaking itself up at some point, which I think is probably 5 years away before you see any of that. Bruce, what are your thoughts on the risk of government, the risk governments pose to Tesla?
Yeah,
in particular antitrust, but otherwise?
Yeah, it's probably no surprise to you, but I take a different approach with governments. And the way I look at it is that what Tesla's doing with full self-driving and lowering the cost of the cars, not so much climate change, but lowering the cost of driving and lowering the cost of transportation, basically, and reducing accidents and reducing vehicle deaths and injuries. It's going to get to the point where that is so clear that governments will have to get out of the way and they'll have to allow it to happen. It's going to happen, like you talked about, it'll be slow at first. You're going to have, this community or this state that allows full self-driving to be implemented. And then, the full value of it as far as transportation cost and injuries and deaths is going to be so clear that all the other governments are going to have to get out of the way. I approach governments, and just like I for years and years and years, I've been doing civil engineering, I've done transportation models, I've done water models, I've done sewer models, and all of them rely on following the path of least resistance. The traffic will go wherever it can go easiest. The water will go wherever it can go easiest. The sewage will go wherever it can go easiest. Politicians, people are the same way. They will go the path that is the easiest to follow. And what's going to happen is going to be so hard to resist Tesla because they're doing so much good for the world that they will have no choice but to get out of the way and allow it to happen.
So let me ask you about my idea for how Tesla could set up a government relations department. So my vision for a government relations department is Tesla hires retired congressmen, former congressman, retired congressman, pays them a nice fat salary, $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year, whatever. Their job they're not to talk policy at all. All they do is they take sitting congressmen out to dinner or lunch or whatever, buy them lunch, buy them dinner, however they can do it ethically so they're not actually paying for it. But they basically go out to lunch and dinner with their buddies who they used to be in Congress with, and they just tell them how great Tesla's treating them. That's it. Mm-hmm. Tesla treats me so great. They don't talk policy at all. Wait, let me finish. There's a little more to it than that.
Well, no, they need to pick them up in a Tesla vehicle and drive them around in Tesla vehicle too.
No, that's not the motivation. The motivation is if you lose your job, the secret underlying motivation of this is if you lose your seat in Congress, Tesla's going to take care of you too. You never say it. Okay. It's just implied. And then the next day, somebody else from the Tesla government relations team, it's a different department, doesn't even have the same name, or maybe it's a lobbyist, an outside lobbying agency, shows up in the congressman's office to talk about whatever policy issue is on Tesla's mind with that particular congressman, right? And, it's a girl who, I'm sorry, it's very brutal to say this, but it's an attractive young woman or attractive young man. It's somebody that's pleasing on the eye and persuasive. And they talk about the retired congressman never talks policy. That's not their job. Their job is just to hint, we're going to take care of you. If you take care of us, we'll take care of you. I know it's not particularly ethical, but I don't think there's a lot of ethics in government anyway. How bad does that idea sound, Bruce?
Well, it's probably not that far. I don't think Tesla will do it, but it's not that far off of what is done and what can be done. And I have a very specific example of it. I used to work for government agencies in the government, like in the city, and then I went to work for a consultant. Well, people saw that I used to work in government, and then I went to work for a consultant who was doing work for the government. And I was treated very well because all those people that were in government saw that as a career path to go from being in government to being a consultant and making more money. And so I was treated very well. I could talk to people, I could get things done. So yeah, that's a real thing.
I'm typing this in the chat. There's a term in Japan called amakudari. And if you Google amakudari, you can read about it on Wikipedia. It's the descent from heaven. It's government bureaucrats descending into jobs in the private sector when they leave government. And it is a common thing in Japan. So it happens everywhere. It's terrible. But okay, so let me just see if there's any other questions. Will carbon taxes have an impact on Tesla stock? Bruce, I'll let you take that one.
If carbon tax is implemented, I'm not saying it should be or shouldn't be. I don't think actually Tesla needs it. But if it was implemented, it would be better for Tesla. They'd have more money to build more factories faster.
Well, carbon tax would raise the price of gasoline effectively. And Tesla is probably carbon efficient in general and how it produces vehicles as well. So it would raise the cost of production for its so-called competitors, if they have any.
Yeah.
So
and going along with a carbon tax is a carbon credit. You're going to do a carbon tax without a carbon credit. And so that's how Tesla directly benefits, is they get the money from the credit.
That's a good thing to ask you about. What's your take on this? You always hear the Tesla Q people saying, oh, Tesla's not really profitable. They make their money from whatever credits. What do they call them? No, not hentai, Daniel. And it's hentai, not henty. Regulatory credits.
Well, yeah, some call them regulatory credits. Or
what's your response to the Tesla Q nonsense about regulatory credits and they're not really profitable?
So Tesla makes 97% or 95% or 93, some players in there, more than 90% of their revenue comes from the sale of vehicles. And the last little bit comes from the regulatory credits. Well, you're just ignoring the rest of the stuff, the 90-something%. That doesn't make any sense. Why don't the profits come from the 10% they made because they make the vehicles so much less expensive?
Yeah.
And the regulatory credits are down below that. I don't know why people put it at the very top as to the only reason you're making your profit is because of this. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, no, and I guess my response to it is, well, if you look at any company, you can pick some piece of their revenue that you don't like and say that's where their profits come from. So in ICE car companies, they make a lot of money on parts and service and finance, right? And actually this is a question, and you could just say, well, they're not profitable. Of course, they're not profitable anyway, most of them. But if you figure that they generate a lot of their profits from finance and service and parts, well, then they're not profitable either, right? You could just pick the part of their revenue you don't like and say that's where their profits come from, and so they're not really profitable. It's a nonsense argument. But let me turn that to a question that I did have that I probably should have asked in the Say call. Do you think Tesla should, General Motors had General Motors GMAC, Ford has Ford Motor Credit, the car companies make a lot of money from financing. As far as I know, Tesla does not have a financing arm that generates income for them. Do you think they should get into that business?
Well, they do some leasing. I don't know who, I don't know. I haven't looked at the specifics of how they do the leasing, whether they carry the money or they have some other arm or company that carries it. I don't know, but it's a really, really small part of Tesla operations. But one point to make on that, and this is kind of one of the nails in the coffin of these other car companies, they have these huge companies that lease out vehicles. Well, when the price of an ICE vehicle goes down because the EVs are so much less expensive, that's just that potential resale of an ICE vehicle when they take it back from a lease is going to just fall through the floor.
Exactly. They are in real trouble because they're leasing vehicles out with expectation they're going to get them back with a certain value. And as EVs take out the value of ICE vehicles, of used ICE vehicles, then their margins, their story collapses. And especially if they have to pay someone to take them away, which is where I think it's heading. So Damien asks a great question. And I'm gonna turn this into I'm gonna modify your question a little bit, Damien. I love your question, but his question is: does Bruce think Apple and Tesla will ever merge to form a holding company? This and Logistics by Tim Cook. Apple is cash rich and product poor, while Tesla and Elon are product rich, boring, etc. by Elon. I think I'll just answer really quickly. I don't see any hint that Tesla would merge with Apple in any way, but I'm gonna ask you about this, and then my next question is going to be about the idea of Elon forming a holding company, X.com or whatever, to hold all of his companies. But first, what do you think about Apple and Tesla merging?
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. That ship sailed. It could have happened. You know, at one point in time when Tesla really needed some money, it could have happened, but not now. Tesla doesn't need any money anymore.
And part of the problem with Damien's question, Tesla is now cash rich.
Oh, yeah.
Apple is cash rich, and Apple's not product poor. Apple's just not, its product line isn't as exciting as Tesla's, but they just had a reveal, and a lot of my friends were very excited about the event Apple just had. So they're not doing that bad on product, but Tesla is cash rich.
But the biggest difference between Apple and Tesla is the total addressable market that Tesla is going after compared to the relatively small total addressable market that Apple is going after.
Right, phones are a much smaller market than cars.
Yeah.
To oversimplify it, what they're both doing.
There's also the whole energy side, which is huge. You look at the 10 largest corporations in the world; they're either energy or car manufacturing.
Yeah. So, all right. So the other question I had for you is that people talked about, and even Elon even once said it was not a bad idea or was a good idea, was forming some kind of holding company to hold all of Elon's companies. I have a theory about how it could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I have a theory about how it could happen. What are your thoughts on that idea?
No, the first one is just from a selfish standpoint. I really like the idea because it would allow me then to own part of Tesla and Neuralink and Boring Company, which I like all those, but I don't want to sell any of my Tesla stock. So that would allow me to do that. It is a good idea in that it combines everything together. The challenge is, how do you structure it so that you can actually do it and everybody's happy? And I think that is such a big challenge that it'll not happen.
Okay, so I made a video about this. My idea for this, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think the problem is that I don't think Elon wants the Boring Company and Neuralink and most of SpaceX to be exposed to public markets because his experience with public markets has been bad. So if it was something where he could take Tesla private, but that wouldn't serve us shareholders, we wouldn't be able to hold shares in a privately held company the way things are structured. The way I saw it happening was Elon creates a holding company, we'll call it X or X.com. He takes some of his shares of Tesla and he puts them in the company. Let's say he takes $20 billion of his Tesla stock and puts it in this company. And he designs the company so that he always holds a majority of the shares of this new holding company. Okay, and he does an IPO. So he's put $20 billion of his stock into this company. And he does an IPO where people can buy $15 billion worth. The public can buy $15 billion worth of the holding company, right? So now he owns more than half the company because he put 20 billion in stock in, and the other people put in 15 billion in stock, right? And now this company acquires the Boring Company and Neuralink and SpaceX, or at least Boring Company and Neuralink. It'd be harder to acquire SpaceX. Maybe he put some of his SpaceX stock into the company too. And the company effectively has a controlling interest in Boring Company and Neuralink. And Elon, between the company and his own stake in Tesla, has a controlling interest in Tesla and the company. And in fact, this company now owns more Tesla than Elon does. Sorry, it owns more than the $20 billion in shares that Elon owns. So he effectively has a greater controlling interest of SpaceX and Tesla than he has now, but by owning only half or a little more than half of the X.com company. I think that's crazy, but how does that sound to you?
Yeah, it sounds very complicated.
What's a non-complicated way to do it?
Well, that's the problem is I don't think there is a non-complicated way to do it, and that's why I don't think it'll happen. It's because it is too complicated, because you have to value different things in different ways, and you have to somehow keep everybody happy in order to accomplish it. And that's just really difficult. I don't have the concern that initially I did have the concern that you have, that would put these other smaller companies under more scrutiny, but actually you bury them under Tesla and SpaceX and they're not on the, Neuralink and Boring Company wouldn't be under scrutiny. They'd just be some comma over here. They wouldn't have that scrutiny.
No, I don't trust the media and the Tesla Q people to not take the opportunity to make, one person dies with the Neuralink and it's a major news story.
We see that now. If there's a Tesla or if there's a SpaceX launch and it's successful, Tesla stock goes up.
Yeah.
If it's not successful, Tesla stock goes down.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense, but it happens now.
Yeah. So Damien and anybody else who's interested in that, I did make a video on my channel. I think if you search my channel for holding or you search my channel for X, I think the video will come up. And I might have mentioned Dave Lee in the video. Jan, thank you for your contribution. Let's see. Damien says Elon needs Tim Cook to manage the holding company and all those headaches, paperwork, et cetera. No, he needs Zach Kirkhorn to manage the holding company. He doesn't need Tim Cook to do anything. Brian says, I think Brian Smith is asking if they did form this major holding company, wouldn't that increase the likelihood of the government breaking it up?
I don't know. I don't think so, because those different parts don't really form a company that is going to squash other companies. And that's one of the reasons for the breakup, is that you have this huge company that has a monopoly in this area, and therefore you have to break it up. The only way I see that as potentially, and the reason I hesitated a little bit, is when you get to the point of having a colony on Mars and that economy is booming and Tesla's going to completely control that colony.
Yeah.
And that could be a problem.
Yeah. Well, I think Elon's going to control the colony anyway, but Aaron asks, does Bruce see the possibility for a dividend in the future?
Oh, in the future. Yeah, they're going to have so much money coming in from full self-driving that they won't have enough to do with it. And so, they'll be doing a dividend. And that's one of the things that Elon will be using to help fund SpaceX, is that dividend.
Yes. Elon's going to fund Mars with the dividends from Robo-taxi network. I think the Robo-taxi network is going to spend so much cash that they literally won't be able to deploy it any other way than to kick dividends out. And Elon's going to want the dividends to fund Mars. And let me be quick about this. For those who are interested in Mars, I don't know if Jessica's still with us. I think she left. Elon has said the goal is to make the cost of taking a person to Mars round trip, but a lot of people, the ideal ultimately will be people will go one way, is about $200,000 a person. And I think I can see how he gets there, and I don't think it's crazy to say $200,000 a person. So if you want to get 1 million people to Mars at $200,000 a person, that's $200 billion. Well, if Bruce and I are right about where Tesla's going to $20,000 a share in 2026, I assume you probably agree $40,000, $50,000 a share in 2030 is, you don't like to go out that far, but you don't think that number would be crazy, right?
Yeah, I don't go out that far, but yeah, that's not a problem.
So if Elon goes from having a net worth of 180 billion to having a net worth of 2 trillion or 10 trillion or whatever, then dropping $200 billion on getting people to Mars is nothing. And, another 800 billion to get their stuff to Mars, to get infrastructure to Mars. I think Elon could fund Mars, and I think that's his ultimate goal. Essentially, is to be able to fund Mars himself and not rely on governments and others to fund it. And if people are willing to pay to get there, great.
I have a question for you, Warren.
Yes.
Do you have any desire to go to Mars?
Yeah, a desire, yes. Am I likely to go? Probably not. I certainly have a desire to go into space. I think that because I'm 55 now, and I think we're not going to see the Mars colony will not be a fully sustainable million-person Mars colony. Maybe it's 20 years away, and I'll be 75. I guess it sort of depends on this. I'm hoping to have a Neuralink to protect me from Alzheimer's by the time I'm 70, which is 15 years away, and hopefully 65. If I have a Neuralink, and I'm talking about, version 5 of the Neuralink that's like 10 chips and you can save state, then yeah, I want to go to Mars. And this is the other problem is, of course, the effect of gravity on a 75-year-old body, right? I don't have a perfect. There are 55-year-olds who have better, healthier physical bodies than I have. I don't know how healthy my body's going to be when I'm 75 years old.
Well, it's interesting because the problem won't be going to Mars with that. The problem will be coming back after 2 years.
Why? Why?
Well, because when you go there, you'll be lighter. The Mars gravity isn't as great, and you're in space, your gravity won't be, it'll be easier to move around. You'll have an easier time, but the problem will be is your body will get used to that easier time. And when you come back, it'll be a real problem.
Yeah, so I guess I would say, if I went, I don't know that I would be coming back. I'm pretty sure my wife's not going to want to go, so this is kind of a moot question. But if you check my channel, I have a video where I talk about using circular tunnels on Mars to generate 1G while you're on Mars. And I think that something like that solution will happen where you will spend 16 hours a day below the surface in a moving vehicle in a tunnel that will be generating 1G of force on your body. It might be 8 hours a day, it might be 16 hours a day, it might be every other day, whatever. But you will only be in Martian gravity for half a day or less. So your body will still experience 1G of Earth gravity, or maybe even more if necessary, so that it's better for your health, because I'm not sure we'll be healthy if we are exposed to 1/3 of Martian gravity all the time, 1/3 of Earth gravity all the time.
Especially over a couple of years. I know that even for me, if I don't keep moving around and keep exercising, I feel it in a couple of days.
Yeah.
So it's pretty dramatic.
So I think if we set up these loops, basically just imagine a boring company tunnel that's ballpark half a mile in diameter, let's say. I'm just making up a number, and there's basically the entire thing is a train. The entire loop is car. It's like one big car, or it's that many cars, or whatever it is, and you cram a bunch of people in there, and it goes at whatever speed is necessary to generate 1G. That rides up on the track, so it's basically at this level going in a circle, and it stops every 8 hours. Maybe it stops every 6 hours. It stops every 8 hours. It uses regenerative braking, so it saves most of that energy. And people who need to get off for their shift get off to go to the Martian surface, and everyone else stays on. And here's a particular problem: is if you want a sustainable colony for the future, there's something we don't know. Can a human woman safely gestate from fertilization to delivery in 0.3 AGs? And I think we're not going to know that answer for a while. I think there's a really strong chance that a woman will not be able to safely carry a baby to term in 0.3 AGs. There's been some tests in microgravity in orbit. I'm not saying for sure that it won't work. I'm saying that could greatly increase the risk of a bad pregnancy, right? A pregnancy not going well, a miscarriage or deformed baby or whatever. So if you do this solution, and anyone who is trying to get pregnant spends a lot more time in the thing, and when they know they're pregnant, they spend the next 9 months in the tunnel, right? Which is going to suck. But for the sake of the baby, you're going to want to spend all your time in the tunnel. That's how you would be able to. It's not going to be sustainable if you can't have children.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't really thought too much about that. But with regard to your idea of the train going around in a circle, you don't need to have the train stop ever. You just have pods that go off and bring people on and bring people off. You just do it in a pod. It's not
I think the pod solution could work, but it could also be messy and risky. And I don't think it's a big deal to stop the train.
Yeah, well, I don't think you need to. You know, you think about what the Boring Company is doing, for example, in Las Vegas. It's not the same scale or anything, but the cars come along and they stop at the station and they get you in, and then you go on. Well, there's another car that's going on, so you can do that with a train with pods. Basically, that the whole tunnel is a train, and you just have the pod come off and stop, and then the pod accelerates back into the.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I worry that you might have your solution might be better than mine. Yeah. I'm just saying it might not work, and my solution works. My solution's really easy. You just stop the train every 6 or 8 hours, and it's not really a significant consequence if you're using regenerative braking.
Yeah, the issue is going to be that train, in order to generate that level of G's, needs to be and not feel it too much, needs to be really big.
Oh yeah,
it can't be just a mile. It probably has to be miles in diameter in order to be so that you can be in there and not feel it.
Well, you have to. I don't think it has to be that big, actually. I think if you look, it's the Coriolis effect is the thing that you would notice, and I think actually even a diameter of a few hundred meters might be enough. But well, I think you
can feel it as a load on your body, but you have to be able to function and do things in that space.
Yep.
You're not just going to be sleeping in there. You're going to be functioning and doing things. And so therefore you need to have a bigger thing. But yeah, but I think it's all technically possible and feasible.
Yeah. If your diameter is too small, then the gravity at your head is different than the gravity at your feet. And that's a problem. You need the diameter to be big enough that the gravity at your head and the gravity at your feet are trivially different.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you can't just do like 100 meters or whatever. You want to do a certain size. But anyway, that's a fun topic. So here's a question for you from Jonathan. And by the way, how are you doing on time? Because I'm
fine.
Okay, so Jonathan asks, Bruce, what's your 2025 bear case? If possible, what probability do you put on this, and what probability do you put on your $20,000 share bull case? I'm going to say 20,000 isn't his bull case. 20,000 is his normal case. He probably thinks it could go higher than 20,000, but let's go with the bear case. What do you think the downside risk is for Tesla in 2025, and what's the probability of that happening?
Yeah, I don't look at it as bear or bull case. I look at it as what probability. And so actually my $20,000 a share is kind of my 50% probability thing. And I haven't actually, for 2025, 2026, I haven't looked at what my 70 or 99%, because I can't have that much certainty out that far. And so I just have the 50% out that far. When I get to March of 2022 though, that 2,000 is my 99% confidence level, and my 70% confidence level is more like 3,000, and my 50% confidence level is 5,000. So within a year, I can do more probabilities. Out 5 years, 50% probability is a pretty good probability for me.
Just a really quick answer to Gary. Gary, I'm not talking, when I say a train, I'm actually thinking it's just on regular tires, and the tunnel surface is completely circular. The tunnel is a complete cylinder, and when a vehicle comes to a stop, it's flat. As the vehicle spins up, it coasts up to the side. So if you had to do it on tracks, the problem is the tracks would be at such a level that when you stopped, it would fall over. So you have to, maybe there's another solution to that problem, but I don't think it would be on rails. I think it would just be on tires, and you'd have to replace tires every once in a while. And I think your pod solution makes a lot of sense for things like, the pod comes off and you charge it, right? But
that's not where it's going to get its energy. To me, if that's going to happen, it's going to be like a hyperloop. It's basically riding on a cushion of air, no wheels, and it's maglev to levitate it off the ground.
Yeah. Something I agree, something like that, because you don't want the friction of the tires.
Right.
So, all right. Could Mars society be funded by citizens owning the financial system? Are you into this Mars type stuff, or should we skip this? Because I don't have an answer to this question.
No, I think it'll be the Mars society will be Elon.
Yeah.
Nobody else will be able to accomplish it.
Yeah, I think Elon's going to have to figure it out. Oh, here's a question. Can Warren do an ROI spreadsheet on dividends from Tesla shares purchased today that produces a 2% dividend in 2040 with the share price at $100,000 a share? I think the returns are rocket to the moon. That's too complicated for me. Oh, Scott Smith asks, I don't know if you know about my cyber cabin idea. Scott Smith asks, can I have the cyber cabin if you don't come back? I'm planning on building a little cabin in the middle of nowhere. Scott, honestly, you could probably take the cyber cabin. I wouldn't notice because I'm not planning to go there that often. You just say, but aging is faster in space. Do we age faster in space? I don't know the answer to that. Do you?
Not necessarily.
I think we age slower in space.
Well, actually, the research that's being done these days with aging and longevity, you listen to various people about things. It could be that in 30 years, you have the ability to live forever, just because of all the medical advancements that are being made with AI and all that. They've, just as an example, they figured out now that your cells have a switch inside of them, and those switches can be activated by being under stress of not eating. And when you turn on that switch, then the cell repairs itself. If you don't turn on the switch, it just keeps growing and it doesn't repair itself. But you turn on the switch, it repairs itself. And so there's a big, I've actually started doing it with intermittent fasting. Probably everybody's heard of that. But what the idea there is you have a period of 12 to, some people do it 16, 18 hours a day, but they don't eat. And that essentially triggers that cell to go into a repair mode, and it repairs essentially you repair yourself from a cell on a cellular basis. So there's going to be lots of advancements in longevity that are going to be truly amazing over the next few years. And that's one of the reasons why ARK Invest has invested so much in the genome and that type of thing, is because they see that coming.
Yeah. All right. So Eli asks, what are your thoughts on Arcimoto's FUV? My answer is that I don't think it will ever succeed at scale. I don't see the market for it, but what are your thoughts on Arcimoto?
I see it as a niche type of a thing. It'll be great for some communities, retirement communities. I think it'd be great. And communities, yeah, when in good weather, then they have it so that you can enclose it. And, it's just thinking about it, it may get more and more appropriate and better as you have all vehicles being full self-driving, because then you don't need the protections that you need now in order to keep safety. And that vehicle doesn't have much in the way of protection for safety.
Yeah. So my answer is, I don't think the niche is very large right now, because I live in a community where people have golf carts and it's not cheaper than a golf cart. So, and I don't see that much of an advantage over a golf cart for it, for the use that it's intended. And then I think the problem is that I don't know that they can scale production to get the cost down to be competitive. And I think Tesla is more likely to make a vehicle that would be better for less money with Tesla's manufacturing methods, that would be safer and better than what Arcimoto is going to do. Breton Long asks if FUV, and Jim Bates, two people mentioned India and the Arcimoto FUV at the same time. Do you think that there's a potential niche for it in India, for example? Wow. The Arcimoto FUV.
Yeah, I guess there's a possibility of that.
I mean, right now it's like $20,000, so I don't see that selling in India when you could buy a car in India for $10,000.
No, yeah, you'd have to dramatically redesign it in order to be cheaper, in order to make it work in India.
Yeah, you have to be able to build it to scale for low cost. Yeah. And I think that it's not necessarily going to be less expensive than the Tesla 2023 Compact, which will be far more functional because it'll seat 4 or 5 people.
Yeah. So India is an interesting country. So what are your thoughts on Tesla in India?
So my thoughts are that the Tesla minibus could be very successful in India. Mm-hmm. Grid storage could be very successful in India. Tesla Semi. I hadn't thought about Semi. Somebody else mentioned, it's a different Bruce. I can't think of his name. He's on,
it would be a smaller Semi, but yeah, Semi. Okay.
I'm not sure.
Their roads just are not, at least my sense is that the roads are not designed to handle that large of a vehicle?
So somebody told me, okay, so first of all, this is what I know. The market for the Class 8 work trucks in North America is about 250,000 vehicles a year. The market in China for Class 8 work truck vehicles in China is 1 million vehicles a year. And I was told that the market for these trucks, the full-size trucks that Tesla's making, comparable, is 500,000 a year. I mean, I think there are some roads in India that can handle vehicles of this size. I think there are roads where it doesn't handle. But if you watch India traffic, you will see large buses in India, and it's just a mess watching them drive around. So if it's true that the market for semi in India is potentially 500,000 trucks, somebody else told me, well, yeah, they're that size, but they're not built as well, so they don't cost as much. Well, the question is, does it deliver value in terms of kilograms per mile, right? If it delivers our kilogram miles, if it delivers a lower cost per kilogram mile, then it's going to be more valuable, and the companies that are using these things are going to buy them. So I think I was going to say solar, but I don't know that Tesla is going to be the low-cost solar provider in India. But grid storage is going to be huge, and maybe Powerwall for wealthy customers. People don't realize this about India. While there's a huge population and there are some wealthy people, the percentage of wealthy people in India is extremely small. So there's maybe 30 million people that could conceivably, I'm not saying they could afford, but could conceivably afford to buy a $25,000 Tesla. It's only about 30 million people that could, maybe it's 30 million households. And then even for those people, it would be a stretch to buy it. So putting a gigafactory producing 4 million vehicles a year in India, I don't think the market could support those vehicles, but it could support the Tesla minibus because there's so many people who are willing to pay 2 cents a mile for a ride.
Yeah. I think if when Tesla moves and does a factory over there, the first thing they're going to produce the most of is batteries for Powerwall type things, and probably solar as well. Solar costs will come down. So they're going to be producing those things in order to provide low-cost energy, low-cost electricity, and then the infrastructure will be there to sell the cars.
Yeah.
So, and it'll be smaller cars.
All right. Breakneck Trent says he was on Twitter Spaces with a few people from India. Their conclusion was that a sub $20,000 vehicle is more beneficial than a 30-person bus. I can't argue with somebody who knows more about India than I do. I can say that I spoke with someone who's from Egypt, and there are large numbers of poor people who just aren't going to be able to buy a car. There's 1.3 or 1.4 billion people in India, and 90% of them cannot afford a car. And they ride transit of one form or another. And if you can lower their cost of transit, make it more convenient and more comfortable. So if you put air conditioning in the minibus and you make it with bulletproof steel, not that I don't think there's a lot of shootings in India, so that's probably not an issue, but you make it more comfortable, more efficient, lower cost for them, and more convenient for them, you will sell every minibus you can make, and you could make millions of them. Millions and millions and millions of them, because there's 1.2 or 1.3 billion people who want that ride.
Yeah, I think you had something about basically taking the Cybertruck size and making it into a bus.
Yes.
That type of a size would be perfect for India. The 30 passenger, I think that's a bit much. I think that's a bit
no, that is the size. They will squeeze 30 people into that thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you're making it bigger than, I'm saying that they will squeeze 30. It would be a 15 passenger bus in the US, but the Indians they will ride on the roof of the thing. They ride on the roofs of the trains. They will squeeze in.
Mm-hmm.
But, practical reality is if it costs, so let's say the Model 3 currently costs, the 2019 Model 3 costs 18 cents a mile to operate. And you get, the efficiencies of the new manufacturing technology, and you build this vehicle that's on the Cybertruck platform, the minibus, I think you're going to get your cost of operating the vehicle down to around 20 cents a mile with the 1,000,000-mile battery and all the manufacturing advantages. And if you do it with cyber style, so you're not painting it, you're going to get your cost of operating that thing down to around 20 cents a mile. If you put 30 passengers in it, the cost per passenger mile is less than a penny. Yeah. And, you figure, okay, sometimes it's not full, but in India, it's always full. Right? I mean, I'm exaggerating only a little bit. So Now you're talking about a person in India wants to go on a 100-mile trip and it costs them $2. Right,
Well,
right.
the other factor to take into this is that with the healthy soil biomes, you'll have a lot more farmers in India that will have more disposable income in order to spend on things.
Right. Well, yeah, if you make transportation, this is something you were talking about earlier, where people are the inflationary versus deflationary, the potential depression. If you lower the cost of transportation, if you lower the cost of energy, you are taking, yes, some people are losing jobs in the industries that were making money off this before, but the consumers have so much more money in their pockets, that this funds all kinds of new businesses that we can't imagine. But that only, be clear about this because this is a political point. I hope you'll forgive me for this. That only works if you have a dynamic economy. And a socialist economy is not a dynamic economy. You need a capitalist economy in order for the jobs to be created, for the businesses to be created that will serve that demand. So that makes it work. So,
well, most economies in the world these days are partially capitalist.
Yeah. All right. So we are pushing 3 hours, and it's approaching midnight here. So I'm going to look really quick to see what other questions. Aaron asks about delivery drones. Are they more efficient than a car delivering a pizza? Aaron, I hope you don't mind me answering this, Bruce, because I actually looked at this recently. So my original thought was that a car delivering a meal from a restaurant would be less expensive than a drone. And what I hadn't thought about, and I saw a paper analyzing this, is the cost of operating the drone is stunningly low because it doesn't weigh very much. So if the drone is delivering a 5-kilogram package, and let's say the drone weighs 20 kilograms, you're only moving 25 kilograms. Now, flying is less efficient than driving, probably. But because you're only moving 25 kilograms instead of 1,000 kilograms, because the car weighs 1,000 kilograms, the drone is actually more efficient. And if the numbers I saw, this was a research paper, the numbers I saw was like the cost of delivering like a 5-mile round trip delivery was like 10 cents. It's like stunning how inexpensive the delivery is. And no matter how hard you work to make your robo-taxi model work, you have 10 meals in it and it drives around, you can't make it more cost effective. So I think that the Tesla FSD AI gets transplanted into the drone deliveries, and I think the drones do the deliveries, not the cars. What do you think about that? What do you think about drones versus cars on delivering meals and other types of deliveries?
If you look at it purely from an economic standpoint, I'd agree with you. However, I think of being in a house, like, it's not so much here because I'm I'm a little bit removed from most people, but even here, but like my daughter lives in Berkeley. And I think of, if you're doing all of those deliveries by drone, you've got these drones flying all over the place. And they're noisy. There's no way you can eliminate the noise unless they figure out how to have a drone fly like an owl where it makes no noise. I just don't think people are going to accept having that many drones around. So what I think from that, I think what's going to happen is you're going to have an autonomous vehicle that has a roof opening, and the drones are inside and they have the packages, and the autonomous vehicle drives around and the drone just flies out of that vehicle and delivers the last 100 feet to the house. But I don't think it's going to drive across. I don't think the drone's going to fly across town. That's just too many drones in the air, too much happening, too much noise. So it's my thoughts on the drones.
Okay. All right. So we're really getting close to 3 hours, and I don't normally go this long, and I'm starting to get tired and I got to go to bed. So I'm going to thank you, Bruce, for coming on and doing this with me. I hope we can do it again sometime, although I think we covered everything and more. But I really enjoyed
things change, and then we can do it again.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this. I really want to thank you tremendously. For those who are watching, Bruce's Twitter handle is in the description below, and a link to Jordan was on with us earlier. A link to his channel is in the description below. Please check out the t-shirts. The Machine That Builds the Machine is one of my most popular shirts. Also, Elon Be Less Wrong, a bunch of stuff. I got a new stainless steel water bottle that says Elon on it. I'm working on getting the NASA worm on the water bottle. I think that's going to happen too. And thanks, Brian. Brian's still with us. A lot of guys are still with us. This is great to see everybody staying with us so long. Please, check out my other videos. I wrote a book called Fair DUI if you want to be safe in a traffic stop. And thank you so much for watching. Bruce, I'm going to end the live stream.
Just one plug for me, and that
yes,
is
sir.
People to go ahead and look at www.healthysoilbiomes and .cc, so healthysoilbiomes.cc. And if you have any interest in that area, let me know. And we're going to be growing this worldwide, so we can use all the help we can get.
Yeah, it's a really cool project. We should have talked about lab-based meat and plant-based meat, but we'll do that another time.
Yeah, I used to think those were kind of a good thing. Now I'm not so gung-ho on them.
All right, very cool. Thank you very much, Bruce. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right,
And
bye-bye.
Thanks, Bruce.